We'll call this special board meeting of the ISD 181 Board of Education to order. Let's start with roll call, please, Sue.
Kevin Boyles,
Here.
Michelle Brecken,
Here.
DJ Donlinger,
Here.
Randy Heidemann,
Here.
Sarah Spear,
Here.
John Ward,
Here.
all present.
Thank you, and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, quick announcement as we move along through the agenda. This meeting of the Brainerd School Board is being conducted in accordance with Minnesota Statutes 13D.02. This meeting is being recorded and, as I understand it, live streamed. Access to the recording will be made available on the school district's website as soon as reasonably possible. So with that said, we'll move along to the approval of this meeting agenda as presented.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
So we have a motion from Director Spear with a second from Director Heidemann to approve the agenda as presented. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please, Sue.
Michelle Brecken,
Yes.
DJ Donlinger,
Yes.
Randy Heidemann,
Yes.
Sarah Spear,
Yes.
John Ward,
Yes.
Kevin Boyles,
Yes.
all pass.
Great, thank you, Sue. For public input, because this is a special board meeting, there will be no public input during this meeting, so we'll move on to the new business. So first action item up on today's agenda is the snow makeup day discussion with the soulful stylings of Dr. Hahn.
Soulful stylings, I like that. So we thought we'd get away with winter without having winter, but last week proved us wrong. We had 2 snow days, Monday and Tuesday of last week. The calendar that was approved by the board a year ago had 2 built-in snow days. One was February 19th, which had passed, and then the other one was yesterday, April 1st. So we made up one of the days with staff and students. Staff were actually scheduled to be here yesterday for an in-service. So really the discussion is what we want to do with that student makeup day. To let you know, we have 169 student days built into the calendar. The state requires 165, so we've met our state obligation. We're well above what's required in instructional minutes. So one of the recommendations I would make is not to bring students back in June. So we'd have to bring them back the first week in June for a day. We have staff that would still come back to meet their contract obligations, but my recommendation is not to make up the student day and have them come back in June. But that is to be discussed by the board.
Great, so we'll open it up for discussion.
We don't
Mr. Chair,
Director Ward.
so Superintendent Hahn has all the certified people been involved in the discussion and the other affected organizations?
So we had this discussion when the calendar was approved, and then as we did weather notices, they were improved, discussed through that. So we have notified the certified unit president just to let them know of the plan. Units know their contractual obligations for days that they need to serve to fulfill their contract. They do have obligation to use earned, safe, and sick time, as well as PTO time if they choose not to make up those days that are added at the end of June.
And the contractual, Mr. Chair, the contractual time, the days are 184, am I correct on that?
For the certified unit, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so as I understand it, then there's no direct impact of this, of what we do as it relates to the student contact day.
You're really having, so your discussion will have no direct impact technically for any of the units unless we bring students back. They know what they need to do to fulfill their contract and what options exist for them. The discussion really is, do you want to have a student makeup day?
Gotcha. And Director Donlinger, I think you were gonna.
Well, I was just gonna ask what the drawbacks are.
So right now on the calendar, if we would have had no snow days, graduation is Friday the 31st. So staff were required to come back for a half day on Monday, June 3rd. Now what's happening is if you do a snow makeup day, they'd have to do that makeup on Monday, June 3rd. And then staff would have a full day on Tuesday the 4th and a half day on the 5th. So typically what we see is when we have like even attendance yesterday with a makeup day, families had different plans. Attendance typically drops off.
Yeah.
For students when it's not planned in the calendar.
And again, we're still
But it
above the
doesn't
state
affect us with the
threshold.
state or.
No, we
No.
still have, we're
We're
above the state
we have-
mandated.
3 days, we basically have 3 days of wiggle room before we drop below threshold requirement.
And there's no lost learning at all.
By this, at the end of the year, we're done with finals. I mean, you're really looking at, do you add that day? So kindergarten, Kinder Friend Day, all of that's still scheduled to be on track.
I don't love having fewer student contact hours, but when everything's done and the kids are ready to be home, it's not very productive.
And that's our only option for makeup day at this point, because it's so late.
What was the attendance on Monday?
I haven't pulled the
Just out of
exact.
curiosity.
Yeah, I can tell you from staff, we were short-staffed.
Oh, really?
Yep. So lots of scrambling and sewing.
All right, well, if I'm reading the room properly, I would probably say that I'd entertain a motion
Motion.
to not bring the students back for a makeup day,
In June?
correct? To
I'll
just
make the
absorb
motion.
that day, okay.
I'll second.
I'll second it.
Online, you get the delay, sorry, Sarah beat you.
Okay.
So we have a motion from Director Dondelinger with a second from Director Spear to not make up the lost day and bring students back in June. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote, please, Sue.
DJ Donlinger,
Yes.
Randy Heidman,
Yes.
Sarah Spear,
Yes.
John Ward,
Yes,
Kevin Boyles,
Yes.
Michelle Brecken.
Yes.
All pass.
Thank you, motion carries. All right, we'll move along then and get to the real reason for today's meeting, which is discuss and decide superintendent search timeline, hiring criteria, stakeholder involvement, and procedures. With a warm welcome to Barb Dorn from the Minnesota School Board Association. Thanks for joining us, Barb.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I assume this is my chair here.
It is.
All right. Do I need
All
to do
right, the
anything
floor
with
is
this?
yours.
Is this on already? Yep. All right, great. Well, first and foremost, Chair Boyles, members of the board here in Brainerd, we're very excited to work with you on the superintendent search. So thank you very, very much for asking MSB to submit a proposal and to work with you over the next few months on finding the next leader for your district. We are truly honored and look forward to working with all of you. I do have some information that is in board book, and you have it electronically. I have hard copies for anyone who might want to take notes as board members as we go along. Would you like me to hand those out as an option for you in addition to this? I already did that. Great. Okay. I'll hand a few of those out. And then I want to talk briefly about the agenda. All right, so. Have one. Superintendent Hahn, would you like, you have one? Would you like one?
I'm good, I've got one. Thanks,
Okay.
Barb.
Yep, thank you. Okay. Would you like one of them?
Is this it?
That's it. That's correct. Okay,
Thanks, Barb.
great. Thank you so much. Would it be helpful for the board if we also screen shared it? Dan, did you offer that? Is it Dan? Or would you prefer just hard copy and board book? It's up to you. Okay,
Put it up there.
there you go. I'm going to talk about this agenda just for a moment as well, because I saw there's 2 items there that have the option of the motion, second, and action. I think what I'd like to do is cover all of this first, and then if someone wants to make a motion to approve what we've discussed and decided as we go along through this packet, that would be great. And then the second area with all of the loose ends, tying up loose ends on the search, I think if there are any loose ends remaining after the meeting, I'd probably ask for a motion to allow me to work directly with Chair Boyles to tie up those ends so we can get this posted tomorrow, if there is anything. I don't expect there to be, but that's what I think that second item could be, if it's okay with the board. All right. I'm going to start, just jump right in with, if you'd be willing to indulge me in some introductions. I'll tell you very briefly a little bit about myself, and then for board members, both online and in person, I'd love to hear a little bit about your backgrounds. I started at MSBA almost 5 years ago. I work exclusively in superintendent search and superintendent evaluation. And for about 7 to 8 months out of the year, it is nothing but superintendent search, because search season starts in November, finishes in early June or so. And that's where I do spend the vast, vast majority of my time. So I feel like I found a home. I was in nonprofit leadership prior to MSBA. I also have worked in the private sector as a consultant for a long time in marketing. I've not been a school board member before, nor a superintendent, so it's been really wonderful for me to learn the roles that all of you fill in service to students across the state of Minnesota. So if you could share with me briefly, and I'm not sure if you'd like to start with the people in the room here or the folks online, but board members, if you could just share with me your name, how long you've been on the board, and why you serve here in Brainerd Public Schools, that would be very helpful.
That's great. Thanks, Barb. Director Brecken, why don't we start with you?
Okay. I am Michelle Brecken. This is my second year on the board. I'm fulfilling a 2-year vacancy. My background is I worked 32 years as a school social worker in 2 different districts, K-8. And I guess the reason I chose to run for the school board is because I just want to continue to ensure that students have access to equitable, fact-based educational opportunities, and I wanted to continue to support students, families, and staff in our wonderful Brainerd district.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Director Ward, would you be so kind as to go next?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Barb, my name is John Ward. I've been on the board for 2 years, like Michelle, filling a vacancy. My history is I was a teacher and a coach for about 34 years. Then I was in the Minnesota State Legislature for 8 years, and currently on the school board. My passion is about public education and kids and what we can do for them. That's good enough.
Thank you.
Director Donlinger.
DJ Donlinger, been on the board for 15 months, just like John and Michelle. Grew up here, graduated from here. My parents did. Wife, her parents, like we got a little history here in Brainerd. And local business guy, and I'm just noticing the decline in enrollment and a few other issues, and I feel like these kids deserve it. And Brainerd's always been one of the top schools in the state, and I think it should be back there again. That's why I ran.
Thank you very much.
Director Heidman.
My name is Randy Heidman. I'm in the same boat that the 3 previous board members mentioned. I'm on my second year of a 4-year term. I was born and raised in southern Minnesota, moved up to Brainerd in 1977. Was in the retirement plan consulting business for 40 plus years, and I finally retired, but then I got elected to school board, so now I call myself semi-retired. And the reason I'm wanted to run is to make sure that the kids get the good education that they used to have. I remember when my children were in school, they both graduated from here. They talked about how great it was, and just maintaining that and maybe making it even better.
Thank you.
Director Spear.
Thanks for joining us, Barb. So nice to have you here. I'm Sarah Spear, and I've been on the board 3 years now. I look at you because I think it's 1 more year than you, or less than you. So my background is in media, education, and marketing. And I ran for school board because I too am passionate about education. I think it's the gateway to every child finding their passion and purpose. And I think Brainerd has an excellent system. We have phenomenal educators who are committed, and a community who's committed to the education of our students too. And I just love being a part of it.
Thank you.
Last and least would be me, Kevin Boyles. So I have been on the board. This is my 4th year and final year on the board. I've been the chair since, January of 23. Somehow I ended up with that again. My background professionally is similar to Director Heidman. I work in the financial services and retirement world. And I graduated from Pillager High School 1,000 years ago. But I've lived all over the country. I have 3 children. Those 3 children were in 8 school systems spread over 7 states as I moved around the country for various things. So when I moved back to Brainerd from Chicago 5 years ago, the decision was to come back because my youngest son, who is autism spectrum, we were in suburban Chicago and I wasn't in love with the high school that he was going to be going into. So we elected to move back to Brainerd to bring him to a school system that I trusted and knew well from having my 2 previous children in the system at various times. The decision to run for school board was driven by that experience, kind of viewing the unprecedented challenges that I saw coming towards school boards and school districts, I felt like my experience by being a local person, but having lived around the country, could potentially bring a different flavor to the board. The voters unfortunately agreed and elected me, and so here I am.
Wonderful, thank you as well. I do appreciate that. It's always helpful to know because boards are so different, communities are so different, school districts are so different that I want to get a little bit of a feel of what the board is and who you are. So first of all, thank you again for your service to the students here. It is a lot of work, it is another job, and we know how much time it takes to read all of the packets and come prepared to discuss and make some really weighty decisions. So thank you for that. In terms of reviewing the process, we'll just go through the agenda now if I may. Move this a little bit. Okay. So in terms of the process, I'm not going to walk through everything because as the packet unfolds, the search will sort of appear in front of you, particularly in terms of the timeline. The things I'd like to say about the process really is twofold. One, there are 2 state statutes that will drive every part of this search. It's the Open Meeting Law and the Government Data Practices Act. So every single part of the search process must be conducted in an open session. There are no closed meetings for a superintendent search, so everything that you do will be done in a meeting like this. They're almost always special meetings because there's a lot to accomplish during that time, so it's usually a special meeting just for search purposes. That being said, you're also going to be handling private data. One of the things that MSBA does is trust our school board members to handle confidential information, so when the time comes and your pool applicant has the windows closed, board members will have access to all of that information. All of that information does contain private data, and we trust you to handle it appropriately. So you're going to have to balance discussing private data in a public meeting, particularly when it comes to the day you select your finalists, and we'll talk about candidate A, B, C, et cetera. It is something, however, that we kind of keep going back to. A statute requires this. And so it's just going to be very transparent within reason because there are some things you're not going to be able to share due to the data privacy laws in the state of Minnesota. So that's one thing. The second thing I would give you as far as overview of the process is this is a search that is owned by the board. This is not an MSBA-led search. This is a school board-led search. Our job is to share with you all of the information that you need to make very informed decisions that are best for this district. So we're never going to tell you what to do. We will make recommendations. We will tell you the pitfalls and the opportunities of all of the decisions that lie ahead of you, and then it's up to you to decide what you'd like to do. But this will be designed and built and lived with the decision by the board members in this room and online. All right, any questions on those 2 things? Because I think the statutes are important. More important is the fact that this search is going to be customized to what you are looking for. It's not cookie cutter. Every point that we reach, I'm going to say, here's now your decision. Do you want to go this way or this way? And when you do that, then that means this or this. And so that's real important. We're not going to tell you ever how you have to conduct this search. The scaffolding's the same due to laws, due to a process that works, those sorts of things. However, ultimately, you're going to customize it for you. Any questions on that? All right, that's it for a review of the process. We're going to jump right into timeline then. If you'd like to share the agenda, you could then kind of walk us through it. And if anyone in the audience is maybe following along on board, but we can do this. The timeline is really the crux of the whole thing. These decisions need to be made today because we're going to publish this timeline tomorrow because candidates are wanting to know what's going to happen and when. All right? So on here, obviously the first thing here is the April 2nd, 4:00 p.m. special meeting. This is today. We are going to be adopting a timeline, talking about hiring criteria, procedures, processes, stakeholder involvement, positioning in the marketplace, and so on and so forth. We are hoping to post this tomorrow. If the decisions are supported by the board around the timeline and the vacancy brochure, we can get this up tomorrow shortly after noon. And we're going to leave it open. We're recommending through April 21st. It's about a 2.5-week window. At this point in search season, that's long enough. If we'd started this search with you in January, perhaps we'd leave it open a longer time. Most searches are about 3 months on average. You are on an accelerated timeline. It's very, very doable. We've started searches as late as the middle of May. So you're not behind by any means. I do think, though, that 2.5-week window is sufficient because people who are interested in this job, and I've gotten calls, it's a very desirable position, they are looking for this and they're ready to drop their hat in the ring. So we don't need a month's time for people to prepare materials. They're already working on it. So we would say April 3rd to April 21st is the window. We would recommend midnight on April 21st. In terms of search preview meetings, this is something that I've already been talking to Kelly and Heidi about, and I want to thank you for your help. Right now, we tentatively have those set up for April 12th, Friday, April 12th, with 3 groups in the district. Search preview meetings are unique to MSBA. They are not focus groups. What they are is it gives an opportunity for the leadership within the district to be brought into the loop to understand again what's happening, when it's happening, and why. So we're meeting with the principals, the administrators, and the union reps, correct?
Correct.
On the 12th. We have a Zoom meeting set up, or Google Meets meeting set up with those groups. And I'm going to meet with them online to share this timeline, the brochure, talk about the MSBA with Q&A session, make sure they understand that, and then let them know to always call me with questions, because information is very, very powerful. So is misinformation. And so early in the search, we want to make sure the information gets out there so it's accurate, transparent, there's that word again, so people know what's happening. If they have questions, they can call me. My phone number, my email address are on all the materials that we share. So right now, we're planning on doing this on the 12th. I always say it's a board decision if you'd like us to meet with those groups. I've never yet had a board turn us down. I think it's a really good idea. However, if you'd prefer we not meet with those groups, we won't. So is it okay with board members that we do meet with those folks on the 12th?
Yes.
Thank you, John. Okay.
Is there a timeline? I mean, a time?
Yes, I think they start at 12:15, maybe 1:45 and 2:30 or 3. Correct. They're on there and they only take about a half hour. We answer any and all questions they have. So we want to share information, answer their questions, and ask for their help because we want them to share the accurate information within their networks as well. So we're usually just going to go ahead and do those. I don't think there's any objections.
And these are open meetings.
They are not, because they're not board meetings. These are meetings between
We don't go.
MSBA,
We're not going.
Right.
MSBA and district staff and supporters and administrators, so.
Gotcha.
Okay. Those will be on the
Barb,
12th. Yes.
Or excuse me a
Brecken.
second, would you tell me the 3 groups that you're gonna meet with again?
I'm doing it from memory.
Principals?
So we're gonna meet with district administration, so cabinet, principals and
Okay.
assistant principals, and then union leaders are the 3 groups.
Okay, okay, great. Okay, thanks.
And thank you for the question, Director Heidman. It is not a board meeting, so you do not need to come and we won't invite you. We want them to feel comfortable asking the questions without potential power imbalances of board members. Does that make
Doesn't
sense?
matter what time they're at.
Yeah.
Not going anyway.
Right.
The informational Q&A session, I'm going to do that on either the 16th or 17th of April. I'm waiting to see the next date on here. And I'm going to do a real quick overview of the whole timeline and then turn it back over to Chair Boyles to actually schedule these with the board. But the Q&A session is a proprietary meeting that MSBA has been doing for the last 2 years. That's a Zoom meeting that we host. Anyone can come to that and watch. However, we know how busy everybody is, so we record that session and then we send it to the district to put on the website. Sometimes we may have 5 people that tune in live because people are busy at 4 o'clock on a Tuesday or something. We do, however, encourage questions in advance, and we'll share that communication tonight with the district so they can put out a notice to staff and to parents. If you have questions about the search process, submit it by usually noon on whichever day we select. I'll answer all of those questions during the Q&A, plus questions that come up during the live session. I'll also share the timeline in the brochure again and talk about the process. It's not a board meeting either. And in fact, sometimes we'd prefer board members wait and watch it on the website later. So again, if you have 5 people or 10 people that are there and they're putting questions in the chat, they don't feel uncomfortable asking those questions because we want it to be very anonymous so they can ask anything that they want about what's going to happen. So not a board meeting either. It's one more thing that MSBA does to ensure that that information gets out there as widely as possible. If only 5 or 10 people come to the live session and I'm answering questions that have been submitted the week before, we may have hundreds of people that watch it later, 24/7 on the website. So that's the purpose really of that Q&A session. The first meeting
me.
that the board will need to, was there someone?
I think Director Ward had a question.
Yes.
So Barb, do you, thank you, Mr. Chair. Barb, do you promote these within the community or how do you promote them within the community so people know about them?
Yes, great question. Thank you very much, Director Ward. The Q&A session, we will have what we call a communications blurb that I will update tonight when I get back in the office and send it to the district. You can send it out then through email blasts to your stakeholders, to staff, and to parents. You'll put it on the website for sure to say, click here if you want to submit questions for MSBA, click here to watch the video once it's uploaded. We'll get the word out as many ways as possible through the institutional knowledge that the district staff have as far as communicating with those stakeholder groups.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What kind of questions do they ask? How long does this take, or I mean, what?
We get questions pretty typically about, can we ask the new superintendent to live in the district? The answer is no. statute prevents you requiring residency for your new superintendent. They ask about, will stakeholders be involved in the interviews? Last time stakeholders did this, what are we going to be doing this time? And our answer will be, it depends on the board's decision when we reach that point in the process.
Gotcha.
Yep, they ask about, do internal applicants have a leg up over external applicants? Is this a national search? Do you actually know what you're doing?
These are all the questions that I had.
Yeah, how much are we paying you? All those questions. We don't shy away from questions. We won't answer questions that might be inappropriate or name names of community members, board members, candidates, et cetera. We will, however, make sure that we answer everything.
Great.
Okay? All right, interview training is the first meeting you're going to hold. And again, right now, I've got some suggested dates in yellow. Don't have to be that date, but there's kind of a cascading effect as you pick the first meeting and the second, things start rolling. So we'll circle back to that, but the interview training is our training session that will make sure you're comfortable with interviewing candidates in a public meeting for a position paid for with taxpayer dollars. There are some questions you can't ask. There's protected categories. There's all kinds of things around the interview process, which you're leading. I'll be here in person, but I don't conduct the interview for you. The board conducts this interview, and we want to make sure you're real comfortable with that. So we have an interview packet we'll give you. We'll answer questions as we go through. So that's interview training. We'll also talk through the
How long is
questions.
interview training?
About an hour, 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
We also want to talk a little bit about the questions because we will come to you with recommended interview questions. We'll build them around your leadership profile, which is to be discussed. We'll build them around the stakeholder input, which we've received from Kelly relative to the previous search and the criteria that was set up for that, as well as your strategic planning, focus groups that were done for that. So we'll have questions we'll propose to the board and say, how do you like questions 1, 2, 6, 8, and 9? And you'll tell us sort of yes or no. But we do want to be careful to keep those questions under wraps if we can. We don't want to give an advantage to candidates by discussing them in public so people could know what to come in and be prepared for the questions. So when we talk about interview questions at night, that's another 15, 20 minutes, about a 2-hour meeting that we're suggesting for the middle of April here.
And that one, I mean,
That's the same meeting.
the informational
meeting.
Q&A thing, those don't, I mean, there's no, sequentially, they can happen at the same time, or one can happen after the other. They're not dependent on each other?
The interview training versus our Q&A session?
Yeah.
Yes, I like to do the Q&A session before I like to do it before the interview meeting. I don't have to, but I like to do it before only because there'll be some things that come up out of the Q&A session that indicates a theme of concern amongst your stakeholders, and that might mean I want to craft some questions around what came up during the Q&A
Okay,
session.
that makes sense.
Okay.
So if we're targeting that for the 17th, it almost takes the 16th off the table then as a
Correct.
potential date for that one, I
Yeah.
guess is where I was going.
Yep, almost. I've done them in the same day before, but I'd want to bump the Q&A to earlier in the day, so the meeting would then be later in the afternoon. So we could do them in the same day, but technically, you never know what's going to come up in a Q&A that I want to weave into your questions.
Okay, we'll just keep that in mind when we get back to
And
calendar.
it's gonna be a Zoom deal? Or is it
That's
gonna
up
be
to
an
you.
Actual meeting?
That's typically, well, you do a lot of folks online, but you need someone here, of course. I
like
can
the
be here
real
in
meeting
person.
personally, but-
Yep, I can be here in person, but when we get to the proposal, there's an upcharge for me to be in person for the 2 middle meetings. And so otherwise, I do those virtually. We have a hybrid delivery model between being here in person for this as well as the interviews, and then online for the middle 2 meetings. I can certainly be here in person for the middle meetings as well. It's $300 per meeting to be here in person, so you can add that or not add that. All right, there's the application deadline, midnight, for people to get their hat in the ring. We will, the next day, look through the applications, make sure that they are complete, that they've uploaded everything that's required to be uploaded. We will give access to board members. We're proposing on the 23rd. You look at these in the cloud. If you're comfortable with technology, we have a way for you to set up username and passwords to look at those in a very confidential place. Please, no coffee shops or places where people can walk behind you and see who you're looking at in terms of resumes. Or if you'd like to look at them in hard copies, we can accommodate that as well. We'll just want to make sure that we work with your HR team here in the district to print 1 set of hard copies, and then you need to make appointments to come in and look at them in the district office. Leave them here when you're done.
Floating all over.
Yep, cannot
What-
be floating all over, for
When-
sure.
As they come in, do you like update this cloud thing, or there's no reason for us to even look in there because?
There's no reason to look at it until after the deadline.
Gotcha.
Once the deadline is passed, people can no longer apply. So
Yeah,
then that's
no
when you have access. Yep. Okay?
Barb, but the Barb,
Yes,
excuse
Chair
me,
Ward.
the board members will be able to review all applicants, all applications.
Yes, all. It is a lot
Okay,
of
thank you.
material. Yes, it's a lot of material.
Thank you.
So you'll not only see cover letters, resumes, letters of recommendation, you'll see their answers to some questions that you've written specific to Brainerd in the application. You'll see their transcripts, you'll see their licenses, you'll see their work history, their educational history. It can feel overwhelming if you have a lot of applications. So one of the things I'll do is share with you sort of the high level. These are the best things to look at to get an initial glimpse of who they are. And then maybe put them in yes, no, maybe piles. And then go back to the maybe pile and try and put them in your own yes and maybe. And then when we come and meet with you and give you our recommendations, you can ask us how they align or don't align with your own lists. I just don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed because there's 600 pages of information. There is some key things to look for to help you get through the amount of data. And the more applicants you have, the harder that is. Fewer applicants you have, the simpler it is, just because of the volume of paper it can be.
So this for us falls firmly into be careful what you wish for territory, because this is exactly what we wanted. One of the things we didn't have access to 2 years ago when we went through this process, so I would say even I guess 6 was all we really saw, and that was a lift to get through all of that information. So I think those recommendations, Barb, are gonna be huge
Okay.
to help us kind of highlight and look at certain things. And I think, again, when, for my part, I mean, I'll probably do a lot of preliminary research, but at the same time, I'm waiting to see how you guys break down from an analytical perspective, how it overlays against the profile that we put together, right?
Yep.
That's, in theory, the part where you earn a lot of your money.
Okay, sounds great, thank you. The next meeting then would be for you to determine the finalists. And so we're giving you approximately a week to look through all of those materials before we're suggesting beginning April 29th or thereafter. This is the meeting where you're discussing private data in a public session. So candidate ABC. We will coach you to not refer to where they've worked, how long they worked there, he, she, anything about them that is identifiable. Because if you can identify any of these candidates by something a board member says, you violated Data Practices Act, so we want to be careful you don't do that. It feels relatively vague because when you ask me, well, why are you not recommending candidate C? I'm also bound by data privacy law, so I can't say very much either. Generally, though, I'm going to be looking very much for people who align with what you say you need in this district and what your stakeholders have said you're looking for. We have a team of service providers and staff that review these for us. Most of them are former superintendents or former board members. So they'll do some deep dives on our preferred candidates to really decide, are they as good as we think they are? Are we still comfortable recommending them? And ultimately, you'll get a list from us that says, here's the highest recommendations, and here are some people on the bubble that we feel are good, and yet the others we feel might be stronger. And then we turn it over to the board and you interview who you want. You do not have to interview who we recommend. You'll know things about some people that we don't know because maybe they're local folks. Maybe they used to work here. Maybe they already work here. We don't necessarily know a lot of that stuff that you know. And I think that's good because we can be more objective without having the bias that comes because they're familiar to you or not. And yet you decide and you do what you want to in terms of those interviews. We'll support you whoever you select. Okay? All
Can I
right.
ask another question, please, Barb?
Yes, Director
Barb?
Ward. Yes.
I noticed that April 21st is Sunday. Is that going to be a problem at all with somebody putting in an application because of the mail and things of such or whatever? I mean, I don't want any problems with that, right?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking it. None of these applications are on paper. Every application is submitted electronically. Sunday tends to be the best day because they've probably started their application during a busy work week. If they have the weekend to polish it and hit submit on Sunday, late Sunday, we actually get quite a few people submitting on the weekend. So, great question, but
Okay,
none of it
thank
is
you.
on paper or in the mail.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, so that's a big night. That's the night that the Googling starts, because at the end of that meeting, we read the names out loud of your finalists. Everybody else that is in that pool, their names stay private forever. If someone comes up to you and says, hey, so-and-so told me they applied, but you're not interviewing them, you have to say no comment, because that's private data. If they're not selected to be interviewed, those names stay private forever. Okay, we talked about that again at the interview training. We are suggesting interviews perhaps beginning May 1st. It's up to you if you want to do them in one big long day or if you want to do them in consecutive days. We have 2 dates potentially selected. Some boards will interview, if you're going to interview 5 or 6 people, for example, that can be a lot. So they might do some on Tuesday evening and some on Wednesday evening. Other boards do all day Saturday or starting at noon on a Thursday and go until 6 or 7 at night. Totally up to you. but those are the interviews for round one. We're suggesting a second round of interviews shortly thereafter. You don't want too long to go by between round one and round two. Some mischief can happen about candidates once they're finalists. People's anxiety levels go way up. You're going to be lobbied for and against people. You're going to hear things that are not fact-based and are opinion-based or rumor-based. You simply need to take it in and say thank you, but don't engage with folks who are trying to sway your decision, because you've seen far more information on these folks than folks that are trying to sway you. But the second round of interview might be 2 or 3 people, go from 5 or 6 to 2 or 3, depends on the size of the pool. We've had some districts this year interview 7 in round one, and some have interviewed 3 in round one. Really depends upon who's in there when you have a chance to look at them. One thing about interviews is I do want to let you know in advance, and I'll share this in the Q&A and the search preview meetings, is we would recommend that you not live stream the interviews for round one or for round two. The reason for that is not because you're trying to hide anything, but it's to create a level playing field for your candidates. Candidates later in the day or on the second day have a huge advantage. They can watch this live streamed and they can know what the questions are and come in far more prepared. I know you want to hire the best candidate, not the best prepared candidate, so we recommend not live streaming. It just needs to get out there if you choose to do that. You don't have to take my recommendation. If you choose that, you need to get the word out to the public that the doors are open, the interviews are public. Please come and watch these interviews. If they become accustomed to the live streaming, which during the pandemic, people got used to this, doing it from, they could watch you do your work, they could watch the recording later, and now it's almost an expectation you have to do it. And no, you do not have to do it, because as long as your doors are open, you're meeting the open meeting law. And to create that level playing field, we will recommend no live streaming, and in fact, no recording. This will be a board decision, though, that you'll make further down the line. You do not make it tonight. Any questions on that?
Now, we just follow, I think, what we did 2 years ago, which was exactly that. We did not stream anything. Doors were open. People attended the interviews. Then we posted the recordings the day after the second day of interviews was done.
Okay. Of all the semifinalists, or
this-
just
once
those
The
that
day
moved on?
after the last initial interview was conducted.
Okay. Yep, and you can certainly do that. With recordings, the one thing it does is it does create a data point for you. At some point, for whatever reason, you take it offline. As a professional courtesy, we usually recommend interviews stay up for a couple of weeks and then you take them down, because candidates, their careers are important to them. And there's some phenomenal administrators that will not interview very well for whatever reason on that particular day. And we hate to put them at a disadvantage if someone goes back and finds it, if it stays up forever into infinity. And that causes them some issues with a future job opportunity. However, if you want to leave them up forever, you can. We recommend taking them down at some point as a courtesy to these people who are interviewing in the public sector for a very high-pressure job. That's your call. All right, then you will, this one I want to talk about briefly, beginning negotiations of an employment contract. You will begin the day after round two, as soon as possible, to get someone under contract. There's 2 ways of doing it. One is a board committee can negotiate with your lone finalist. I'm not sure how you've done it previously. If you do that, if you've adopted policy 213, you need to post 3 days in advance of that committee meeting to negotiate with that person. Most boards are deciding in advance what parameters they're okay with in terms of the contract. Maybe a personnel committee is working on a model contract and comes to the board and says, here's what we think. And then one person could negotiate on your behalf immediately after that second interview. Of course, they can't come to any agreements, they just negotiate and then bring a final contract back to the board. Do you have a sense whether it would be a committee negotiating with your lone finalists or an individual on behalf of the board? It's most often the chair, doesn't have to be. And I can change this if you think you already know how you want to negotiate, but it's going to be here pretty quickly, in about a month and a half, so.
I think it's an item worthy of discussion. I don't 100% know how we did it last time. I think it was the chair and vice chair that did it.
Correct.
Now, that's not by any stretch of the imagination is how I think we should do it. But I know.
That seems a lot better than,
And then, Barb, for your benefit,
Sorry,
Sarah and I were
everybody.
the only 2 that were on the board when we did the last hiring process, just for the record.
Okay.
But we were both relatively new and, just sort of sat at the end of the table and just,
Sure.
trying to stay out of trouble. So thoughts on what we should do?
I think the individual's a way more efficient way to go about things.
I do too.
Because this is gonna be, oh, what about this? And what about that? It's like, you know, we're already at the point, we'll have a range. Like, we're not just gonna go in there blind and be like, what'd you take? Would you take this, Randy? Oh, no, I'm not gonna do that. Okay, we'll give you a little more then, you know, it's not gonna be like that. So I would think that it wouldn't be a tremendous deal that the whole board would have to be involved in, personally.
Well, I think the fundamental question is it a non-quorum committee of board members coupled with somebody like Director Bennett?
Barb was saying that you either have a committee, like 3 of us,
Well,
or you
in theory,
have
it's an option,
one
right?
person.
I mean, in your experience, is it split kind of depending on the mood of the board, or do you see one methodology that takes precedence in most districts?
The most common is one person negotiates immediately the next day with the candidate.
Okay,
If you need to wait those 3 days, and I don't know if you post your committee meetings, but if you do that, then you have to find a time that works for that candidate as well as the 3 board members, and you
Yeah,
do
yeah, yeah.
lose like 4 to 5 days before you can even start talking about a contract with that individual. And I don't know that you have time to slow things down right now. So
because there are some finer points that you get into when you get into that contract. It's not just salary, obviously. There's
Well, no,
there's a lot of other elements to it, but
is there an existing contract or model contract that you could come to agreement in advance, either through a personnel committee or, so the board could say, yes, this is the contract that we like, now that one person can go. So it happens parallel to the search, that the finer points of a contract are being kind of figured out in advance, and who would be on that group to do that. And then the one person can go with it the day after round 2 interviews.
Good idea.
right? I want to be mindful of our 2 online participants too. Make sure, did you both catch everything, and do you have any comment or questions?
Yeah, I have a comment. Of course, we have a diverse board. I think that's pretty well known, huh? And I think that it would be important for whoever negotiates to communicate with all board members somehow within and following within open meeting laws, rules, and everything else or whatever, just to get the diversity of the board opinion. But I agree with what DJ and I think Kevin said, is one person negotiating, I think is a good idea. But I also think that there's enough diversity within the board to check back with board members.
Yep, okay. I mean, I think, just voicing my own thoughts, but Director Heidman, Director Spear, anything?
I mean, if we want to start with the existing contract that we use and go from there and see if there's anything that we would want to revisit as a board.
So that's kind of where my head was going. I just want to make sure, Director Heidman, do you have any other additional thoughts beyond?
No, I mean, I'd look at the existing contract and, I mean, I wouldn't have a problem if both the chair and the vice chair were involved initially in the discussion.
Okay.
Because that way, one can play off the other if a thought comes up. You've both been through this process as well, so maybe having another thought process wouldn't really slow the process down that much.
Well, I mean, I'm always willing to have a partner in crime. And I also think, to Director Ward's point, for us to be able to disseminate information and gather feedback from individual board members, it would speed that process up, I think, if we get in there. What I would say on the contract side is there's no reason, Barb, that we couldn't start taking the existing contract that we used for Dr. Hahn, for example, and starting to work on that. We could do that work in our personnel committee. We could schedule a special meeting for that personnel committee ASAP. That's Director Ward and myself are on that committee. And we could start doing that work, and then we could start routing that around to everybody, to have everybody take a look at the finer points and see.
That's what I was gonna ask, is how do we go through the contract when we have to have another open meeting? Go through the contract, or do we, I mean, as long as we're not all on the same chain or phone call or anything like that, it's like, it's just a lot of work for you guys. 'Cause
What-
it's like,
what
I'm
if-
calling you, then
yeah,
Randy's calling you,
that's
then
true.
John's calling you,
What-
Michelle's calling you.
You know, I could see it playing out a lot, how we did policy 631, where, you know, we did that work at the committee level with Director Heidman and myself, and then each one of us kind of came around and gathered feedback, and then we just kind of round robined it. then brought it back to a board meeting. I think that conceivably could work. I would just
I don't
say,
think we're gonna have any big changes in it.
not until the negotiations, I wouldn't think. Right, because we don't know what that individual is gonna come back on, whether it's paid time off or certain
Not giving
elements of
any ideas,
benefits
gotta-
packages
Let's
or,
not be giving out ideas.
yeah.
Let's wait. Don't tell them what play we're gonna
Oh, I think they all know exactly what they want to play with in those things.
run.
Yeah, you think?
So I think if the board is comfortable with that, I think that the idea of having the first look at the contract, go through it in benefits committee,
Get ahead of it.
yep, get in front of
Don't
it,
slow it down.
then get it
Where we're
routed to the
gonna go.
board, just so you have it. We may not take any action or do anything, but just so you understand the verbiage that's in there. Maybe we have MSBA take a look and say, these are the sections that people typically will play with. If that's within the purview of what you can do for us, to highlight that and say, this is something somebody will probably negotiate on. This is something somebody will probably negotiate on. Then at least as a collective group of six, we kind of know, where those points are, and then Director Spear and I can, when we get to the finalist, the final that we're gonna negotiate with, then, then we can, during that meeting, we can hone in on that if we need to. Director
I'll let you guys, you could do whatever you feel is right, but I do think that you should just go with one person negotiating. You can hang up the phone, call your vice chair. You can hang up the phone and call your chair. It doesn't matter. It'll go faster. I don't wanna negotiate two against one. It's like, afraid to say anything. It's like showing up to a gunfight with a knife, it's like, there's two of you against me. I'm instantly on defense. That should just be one-on-one. And then you're gonna end up going through the whole board anyways, aren't you? Isn't that how it works?
The whole
Go
board
to
has to
approve the
approve.
final
Well, I'll
contract.
have to
yeah.
approve it.
Well, right, but if they
Yeah.
said yes, then you just call up and say, oh, we got ourselves a deal. If they say no, then you're gonna, call me, you're gonna call everybody to find out what the deal is. I think I'd take their advice, and I would do what she said. It was the majority of the time they see is one person, one-on-one, personally. But,
We only really get about 90 days of putting you on the spot. You've been on the other side of that. How did that play out when,
I'd say the contract I have is very different and very slimmed down compared to the model contract provided by MASA. So I think it'd be important that you look at a model contract that's provided, probably the contract that exists, so you can be prepared for what may be discussed. So I think there's some learning to do there. And then I would lean on Barb, she's dealing with lots of searches now, and I think would be very in tune with what superintendent candidates are looking for in a contract. So right now, I would say ours are very different from.
how about the negotiation piece?
I spoke directly to the chair, and I think the chair and vice chair came to visit me collectively when they were ready to present.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, we do have a personnel committee on April 17th. I just want to make you aware of that.
That should fall within the timeline as it relates to reviewing the contract itself, to Dr. Hahn's point.
So I could have
Get a hold of the,
I could have materials ready.
okay.
I can lean on Barb to.
I think that's a no-brainer for a next step unless somebody objects to it.
I did make a note to send the model contract to the two of you. I could include superintendent, okay. Because with all of the changes that came down from the legislature last year, about a month ago, we finally arrived at a consensus with MASA between the School Boards Association and the Superintendent's Association about a model contract we could both support. And so it's fairly recent. It's similar to the one we used to have, and it sounds like it's lengthier than what you currently have, Superintendent Hahn. So I'd like to send the three of you our model contract because MASA supports it as well. We've come to an agreement. And so there's things they wanted, there's things we wanted, and there's now a fairly good contract we feel is fair to superintendents and school boards. So I'll send that to the three of you to perhaps discuss then on the 17th.
Much appreciated.
Okay,
That
I will
would
send that
be
out.
Lovely.
Okay, so I'm going to change the wording here on the to be determined. I'm going to put board designee begins negotiations of employment contract with lone finalists. And I'm going to scribble out the time to be determined because it's not a committee meeting, so you don't need to have the 3 days.
That would be
posting
correct. I
notice.
think what we've got is consensus. We don't want this in a committee format,
Okay,
right?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
okay,
Yep. Get moving.
great. And then you'll approve the employment contract. Now, one thing I do want to point out, and I'm sure you read this in the proposal, if for whatever reason you don't find the right person, During the search, whether it's when you look at the pool or after the first round or after the second round, we will help you find an interim superintendent, and we will start the search over again with you this winter, late fall, early winter, at no additional charge. In fact, we don't ever invoice for our searches until you have a signed contract with a new superintendent. So if for whatever reason, we don't want you to settle, you don't find someone this spring, we would do this next year, and then probably next spring you'd get an invoice from us, but not until that point. There won't be any charges at all. So that's the anticipated date, sometime in May, you'll have a contract signed with your new superintendent, and if not, we know former superintendents that are happy to step in for 1 year as your interim and hold things together while we work.
So what you're saying is you'd get us an interim, and then we would start this process over next fall to find the permanent.
Right.
I thought you meant like with next fall, winter, we'll get around to finding the interim. I'm like,
No.
this could be a little bit of
No, by the end of April, I'm getting lots of calls from districts that need an interim, and I have lots of, it's not called a Rolodex anymore, that's kind of dates me, but I have a list of people who want to serve as interims for 1 year. And they're not interested in the long-term job, they just want to help the district for a year. So I have names of folks that could step in if needed. There's not a lot. Once people retire, they actually want to enjoy their retirement, and a superintendent job is more than full-time, but I do have folks who could help you if we don't find someone that you really want, okay? That's it for the timeline. I'm going to stop now because I think now you understand the process and the big picture, so I'm going to turn it back over to Chair Boyles to facilitate. In yellow, do any of these dates work, and if so, what time on those dates? And I'll get these edits made tonight to the timeline.
All right, this is that point where we dig into calendars, folks. And I have not had any conversations with board members about any of this yet. We were just trying to follow your instructions and show up with our calendars in hand and just kind of hammer away at this.
We're easily influenceable, Barb. Trainable.
So I guess the first date in question would be, of course, the interview training session, right? That's meeting TBD number 1, which we're targeting probably ideally, since you already have preliminarily scheduled that Q&A session for the 17th. The ideal date would perhaps be the 18th of April, pending what everybody's schedule says. That's a Thursday.
I like the 18th.
And then, Barb, in your experience, these are generally done late afternoon, evening?
Whenever works for the board. I've done morning meetings at 7:30 in the morning,
I
I've
know.
done noon.
For me, as late as possible in the business day into the early evening is best.
Oh, I'm really busy, so
You know, you say that, but you retired people scare the hell out of me, because I'm like, I'm afraid to retire. I try to get a lunch with you guys, and it's like, I can't do it that day.
They're a little bit-
I'm like, aren't you retired?
no,
So first,
whatever works.
First, let's figure out if we're gonna do it in person or Zoom. I said I like in person, but I thought that's what you want. I thought it was standard behavior. If you wanna do the Zoom thing, it's fine. I've gotta be out of state.
Oh, yeah, you,
Leave on the
22nd
6th.
works for you, though, doesn't
It
it?
works fine, yeah. And I can do it if you guys, I'll be on the West Coast. So I could do it on the 17th, but I'm traveling on the 16th, and I'd like to come back here the night of the 18th. So if we did it on the 17th, which is the bad day, because that's the day you're gonna do your Q&A thing in the morning.
All right, can we slide to the 22nd and check
I
calendars?
can do them whenever.
22nd works for me. I'll just.
No, I apologize. You actually told me that earlier, and I forgot about it.
Whatever time.
Directors Ward and Brecken, Monday, the 22nd, late afternoon into evening, say 4:30.
That works for me.
Works
you
for
in-
me. The
are you-
22nd late in the afternoon?
Yeah, yep. And Director Ward, are you back from Florida by then, or are you just still hanging out?
No, we'll be back April 11th.
Okay, how about you, Director Brecken?
I'll be back April 12th.
Perfect, okay. Then we might actually have an anomaly not seen in 6 months of the year with all 6 of us in the same room again. So 22nd works for me.
That works for me.
All right, and Barb, refresh me, you said that's an hour to a 45-minute meeting?
2 hours.
We allot about 2 hours.
2 hours?
Depends on how many questions you might have.
All right, would 5 o'clock be acceptable?
Not with me.
Yeah.
Are we gonna do it by Zoom? Are we gonna get here? Because if we're doing it by Zoom, then we're not all gonna be in the same room, but it doesn't matter.
I mean, I guess my preference would be the same as yours, that if we're all local anyway, we might as well, in as much as everybody is available, and make it available via Zoom. The question is, do we want Barb to come up to facilitate?
Oh, So you could do a Zoom and we'd just all be here.
Correct.
Well, I think we just do that.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah,
difference.
makes sense to me.
And
You know, I
we'll
guess-
circle back to that at the end when we talk about the search agreement, whether you want me here in person or you want it
Okay,
virtual.
all right, so we're looking at 22nd, 5 o'clock PM for the interview training session.
Okay,
Where?
Here. Boardroom, but it'd be available on Zoom. And it's a special board meeting, so we'd follow the same rules as we always do in terms of posting it publicly. If somebody was remote for some reason, then we can, post your address like we did for the last board meeting.
Okay,
You said 5 o'clock, right?
Yes. It gets, in theory, if it's 2 hours, as Barb said, that has us ready for happy hour at Sheps by 7.
There you go.
That was a joke for anybody watching the recording. All right, so then we move on to the next yellow item, which would be, we've reviewed all the applications. When the 21st deadline comes in, those will be available to us on the 23rd. And if I heard you right, Barb, then we have basically a week to review those, at which time then MSBA comes forward, you come forward with your recommendations and highlights. Do we then have the special meeting, or is that at that meeting?
at that meeting.
Okay, so that's the meeting where they present their recommendations based on mining through all of the resumes that we get and packets that we get, plus our own individual research that we've done over the prior week.
Thought to be a pretty good meeting. That might take a little while.
It can go
It
very
can.
quickly and it can take a very long time. It depends on your pool and how much in agreement you are as the six of you amongst each other and with our recommendations.
But
It's
to your
generally
point, Director Donlinger, I
hour
think we
and a
should
half.
shoot for earlier in the day for that one, so it doesn't end up being a marathon or into the
Yeah.
wee hours. Is that what you were getting at?
Kinda.
Okay, so let's look at those target dates of the, maybe starting on the 30th, 1st or 2nd. See, that's a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday?
Was it 29th?
Got the 29th too.
Yeah, I was just thinking to give us a full week to review the packet. That's the only
Okay.
reason I lopped that off, but we can throw it in the mix if you want.
We just do May Day?
Are you
The
bringing
first?
baskets?
We'll get the
April
packets
1st,
on the
right?
23rd,
May
right?
Day?
Wednesday the 1st?
21st. That's why I said bring your basket.
We're gonna get the applicants on the 23rd.
Correct.
Well,
And a full
Yeah.
week would take us to the 30th or the 1st of May.
yeah, the only thing with that is it pushes back then our timeline for interviews.
So do we want to try to squeeze it earlier, like that Monday or Tuesday, the 29th or 30th?
Might be nice.
I mean, I'm sitting here, I have nothing on those days. I can move everything
I have
I
nothing
have.
on those days.
So if anybody's
The-
got,
the-
say again, Michelle?
The 29th, yeah, the 29th doesn't work for me, and also that's the all sports banquet. I don't know if anybody's planning to attend that.
Here you go.
But I can do the 30th by late morning.
Okay, should we maybe target midday on the 30th? Everybody double check. John, can you double check yours?
I'm looking, it's okay. It's
Okay.
okay, I'm looking.
Would it be okay if we did a noon deal? Or 1 o'clock?
Either's fine with me.
How about 1?
Okay,
On the 30th?
On the 30th, correct?
Mhm.
That work, RJ?
Oh, I've got to
Yes,
get all these
yep.
invites ready too.
I'll fit it into my calendar. There's nothing.
And that
on
is
it.
to, that meeting is to do what?
that meeting is that, we've had a week at that point to review all of the online applications that came in. At that meeting, Barb will
Yes.
come forward and present MSBA's recommendations on the candidates that they've screened, which is all of them.
Okay,
And then we will determine our finalists, or our first round of interviews, and that can be as many as 7, as few as 3, if that's how we want to roll. And then the next meeting after that is the one we schedule, but that's the one we come out of it and say, these are the people we want to interview ASAP.
okay. All right,
Which then leads us to the next one, which comes literally right on the heels of that, probably as quickly as possible. So to that point of looking at the 2nd or 3rd, that Thursday or Friday, although we want to do that so that we can do them on 2 consecutive days, so we've got to make sure.
Yeah.
Either all in one day, which is difficult for most boards unless it's a Saturday, or 2 consecutive evenings in case you have more than 3. You could do 4 in one evening, but it's a lot. Usually
Yeah.
it maxes 3 in one evening and then 2 or 3 the next.
Last time we did 3 and 3, and it was as much as you would want to do.
Unless you did like I'm fine with that, but unless you did the Saturday deal where you had like 8, 9, and 10, and then you had 1, 2, and 3. So you got a couple hour break in the middle where you could go.
Yeah. Now, of course, that process was, we don't have to follow that exact process this time in terms of what happened in those particular cases was the candidates in that particular role. I think we did those all virtually, the first round.
No,
We were all here in the boardroom, but
they were
they were all virtual the first time around, weren't they?
I know
no.
we had one person that was.
Maybe it was
virtual.
just the one guy the young
Everybody
guy.
else- I was gonna say everybody else was.
Everybody else was in person.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you did 2 evenings, because we all had evening interviews.
Yep, but
I
those
like
were not
that.
where we didn't do dinner or anything, it was just, we just had a structured, it was literally we were on a shot clock for the most part. It was, we had the interview questions, each one of us was assigned interview questions, and we plunked through it.
Usually it's 1 hour and then a 15-minute break, 1 hour, 15 minutes,
Yeah.
1 hour, 15 minutes. If you
So
want
if
to
you
do
do
them
that on
longer,
2
you can.
subsequent evenings, what I would say is we're looking at the third and the fourth, or the third and the fourth, or the 6th and the 7th. The 4th gets weird, because that's a Saturday.
I won't be in town I'll be at Mayo on the 4th, 5th, and 6th.
I'll take that Monday out.
Why don't you do the second and third?
Yeah, we could do the second.
Yeah, we'd have to
third.
pretty much just do it 2nd and 3rd, if everybody can make that work. That's Wednesday, Thursday. No, Thursday, Friday, sorry.
Thursday, Friday.
Let me double check, make sure I got nothing funky. Nope, I'm good. Just, I wanna let everybody know I actually do work, but I can move the stuff around.
Would you,
Really?
I could just see Director Donnellinger cooking.
What Randy's on. 6 Saturdays and a Sunday. I mean, that's all he's got.
Any objections,
busy
then
man.
we would look at probably 6 PM or 5 PM, like a 5,
Probably
If-
just
6:30,
if you can-
8.
go 4.
Are you talking the evening interviews?
Yeah.
If you could start by 4 or 4:30,
Okay.
that'd be best, because the first night, not so much, because the first night, if you start at 5, you'd start at 5, you'd have one at 6:15, one at 7, you'd be done at 8:30.
Yep,
5 to 8:30, you're out of here, and then you continue that meeting until the next day. The next day, if you do the same thing, not only do you have the potentially 3 interviews, then you have a half-hour break in there so that we can tabulate the results of the scoring sheets the boards have tabulated. And then you have your deliberations.
right, then we have
That
to
could
decide
take
which ones are
20 minutes, it
finalists.
could take 5 hours to figure out who to bring back. So second day, you might want to start a little earlier if you can, or you're here pretty late.
Well, and then think if you get an applicant from Baudette, southern Minnesota. So
Or out of state.
we're gonna get them down at 10 o'clock and then I suppose that's their problem. Really, I mean, if you gotta get a hotel room, you gotta get a hotel room.
Okay, so let's zero in on those 2 dates, the 2nd and the 3rd, the Thursday, Friday. Just globally, does anybody have any issues from 4 o'clock onward those days? Okay, so those are our 2 dates.
I do now.
oh,
I've got a schedule.
John, did you have something?
No, I was just gonna say I'm fine on that.
Okay, then we'll do that, and then TBD on the exact times based on how many applicants we want to talk to, but I presume 4 o'clock, let's just say 4 o'clock on the first day.
John, do you have to be at Mayo on the 4th? I mean, do you need to get out of here at an earlier time?
Yeah, I have to be down there on Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
So do you have to be there Saturday morning, or you have to get there Saturday sometime during the day? I mean, do you need
4
to get out of
PM.
here?
4 p.m.
Okay, so you're,
Okay,
I don't really want to do something and then go to Mayo, so.
yep, no, I gotcha. So we'll work with Barb on the best practices on terms of time of day, but just make sure your calendars are blocked out from 4 o'clock onward on both of those days.
I like the
Special
4th.
meetings on the 2nd and 3rd,
Second
right?
and- second and third.
Yes. Then out of that meeting, those are interviews. Then, as Barb indicated, the second one, the first meeting will be 3 interviews or whatever, half of the interviews, let's just say it that way. The second meeting, the next day, will be the other half of the interviews, followed by the 6 of us collectively coming to a decision on how many we're going to bring back to actually as finalists. Last time, we brought 3. There's no rule that says we have to do that. We can do more or less, but that's going to dictate the next meeting.
May I put 4 PM for both those dates? the
Yes,
second and
that
third?
sounds fine.
Okay, we can always change this with 3 days' notice, but if I can put 4 PM for the second and third.
That makes sense.
Right now,
And that's consistent with what you've done with other districts.
yes.
Okay.
And the third's a Friday night.
We party after.
Well, I just mean,
Yeah, we'll go to Ernie's.
no, we can go anywhere.
Okay,
All right, so then, John, you're gone then the 6th, 7th, and 8th?
No, well, hopefully, my tests are done on the 6th, and I hope that we don't have any more, so hopefully I'll be back on the 6th, the evening of the 6th, I hope.
Okay, so then let's kind of drift into that next week and take a look. Does anybody have, let's say, between the 7th and 7th and 10th, let's try to keep them in the work week if we can. So that's a Tuesday through a Friday. Does anybody have anything 7, 8, 9, 10 that's a showstopper?
Not yet.
All right, so the structure of that
13th,
next
yeah.
round, then that's a long day.
for the candidates more than for the board.
Right, because they come in and do the whole day, then they meet with us and do their interview. Last time, we did dinner with each one of the candidates.
We'd recommend
board.
against that.
Okay, that's good, that saves us 2 hours.
It should be an open meeting if you do so, and it should be posted since the board is with the candidate, and we also discourage it because you get into topics that are irrelevant to the position of superintendent. And you can cross over into conversations about protected classes and kids and church and
That
all kinds of things
completely
at
works
dinner,
for us.
so I always worry about
Yeah,
boards
I mean,
that
we
do
did
that.
it, did them as open meetings last time. In fact,
Yep.
our newspaper people were at the
I'm
dinner
sure
with
they
us.
were,
but-
yep,
Yep.
yep. But you can do them if you'd like. This is one of those recommendations I'd say
No, I
not to
think
do.
for expediency, if nothing else, it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Because it created, I think, created some, I would have preferred had we not done those myself. It's the only thing I remember from last time strongly that I wish we hadn't done, other than hiring who we hired, but, all right, so we have the 7th through the 10th. Nobody has any conflicts, so we're looking at consecutive evenings is best, again, because these are live meetings that we have to record.
All in one day.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, one day. Oh,
One day,
so it's
round
just
two
one
in
day.
our process is one day.
Yep.
And they'll have tours of the district beforehand, probably we'll talk through tours, how to do all that. And then they'll meet with the board, and depending upon what you decide further down the road relative to stakeholders in that round 2 interviews. Candidates have a long day, you just have 2 or 3 interviews, and then deliberations. So you can
So
start
let-
whenever you'd like.
So we do it based on the assumption that we'll do 3 interviews. We might not. We may only have 2 finalists or something, but I think from a timing perspective, we should at least plan on 3. So same thing, what time we should probably, because those interviews are longer.
They can be, if you want them to be. They could include presentations, written samples, anything you might like. Generally, they're an hour to an hour and 15 minutes, but if you want to go longer, hour and a half, you can.
All right, so if we allow an hour and a half for each one of them with a 15-minute break in between, you're at 2 hours or 3, 4, 5 and a quarter hours, give or take.
Pretty close.
So 4 o'clock again would be, that
don't
gives
think
each of the
that-
candidates time to have
I
completed
don't
their.
think so. I think you start at 1 o'clock.
Okay,
Does that give enough time earlier in the day for the stakeholder meetings and for,
If there are stakeholder meetings, yes. The tours would have to be shorter, though.
okay.
Who gives the
Depends how many
tours?
people- Who gives the tours?
Yeah.
Great question. We have seen in the last year or 2, we've recommended that students get to be a part of that. However, the administrators in each building actually walk around and talk programs with the candidates. What has been well-received, and you don't have to do it, is maybe 2 students per candidate accompany them around the district. And it gives the candidates a chance to ask students questions about what it's like to go to school here. They tend to be juniors or seniors. So you may need 4 to 6 students possibly helping. It's just a different way to involve them. And you have to have someone else provide transportation because you don't want anybody driving your candidates around in their cars, let alone students, or sometimes it's community members in lieu of students. But the building administrators are the ones that will walk them through and explain the programs in their building. Generally, they want to see 1 elementary a middle school and a high school. They don't have to see them during student hours. Sometimes people are worried if the tours are occurring at 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Candidates have told us they just want to see the facilities, to see the condition. They want to see how programs are offered. They want to ask the administrators questions about programming inside those walls. But it might be community members. We've just seen students lately, the trend being the hosts are students. Doesn't have to be.
It was Ruth and Charles again, chair and vice chair drove the candidates around.
I mean, if we started at 1, the next candidate could be like touring buildings at 10.
Yep, well, you just cycle them in one
No,
behind the
they're
other.
gonna, they got to be here 2:30,
Right,
let's say. So they could show up at noon and run around, look at a few schools and meet some principals. And they don't all go together.
No.
So, you know, I'm just thinking, if we start at 4 o'clock, we have 5.5 hours interviews.
Yeah, well,
We're at 9:30.
Yep.
Now, if things get a little crazy, like the last time you guys did this, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. And you know, if I was applying for one of these jobs, I'm a lot sharper at 11 o'clock in the morning than I am at 6 o'clock at night. If my turn rolls around at 8 o'clock at night, it's like, really, how crisp am I? I mean, it's a pretty big job. It's important. And I would just think that they'd be fresher and sharper earlier in the day. And so would we, by the way.
yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's a lot of information to process.
It is.
Anybody else?
Last time they were 3 separate days.
Yeah,
So the
they were
candidate
Oh,
one
were
day,
they?
one day, yeah, it was a whole day deal. The
Whole
board
day.
didn't come into play until like 6.
One of the things that I appreciated about that, though, is we were able to bake in getting feedback, written feedback from the stakeholder groups that we could then look at and include in our conversation. Like, you know, their perception of the candidate, what they thought was great,
Think
or.
about that, Barb.
So I'm going to leap ahead a little bit to interview training, because one of the things we'll talk about that night is potential stakeholder involvement in round 2. Generally speaking, if you want to involve stakeholders, it sounds like there were separate interview committees.
It was just, I think, an invite. There was a student group and there was a,
We had a period of time where students were allowed to ask questions, so we had about 40 to 50 students that we were with. We went to the administrative team, there was a teacher team, there was community members. It was a 10-hour day of, the candidate had a long day. And then time in buildings and coming back. It was 6 o'clock, the candidate came back to the board and interviewed.
And the people on those groups, the committee group, for example, or the staff group, were they just volunteers and it was an open call to whoever wants to come in and just ask questions of the candidates and provide feedback to the board?
There was, I think the search firm had prepared and then met with that committee before the candidate came in, said, here's a series of questions. But written feedback was gathered to give directly to the board.
And they got to volunteer to serve in that capacity and provide you with feedback? It wasn't a selected group of people? Okay, there's pros and cons to all of those things. So for example, at that meeting on April 22nd, we'll talk about that. Things have really changed since the pandemic as far as traditional search methodologies, because it has been very traditionally that not only in the beginning do you have the survey, which I know you did, but you do focus groups and listening sessions and gather all of that. And then at the end, interview committees were quite common. And we have, in the last couple of years, I think we've done about 64 searches, and we have had 3 districts have interview committees where they interview separately from the board and provide written feedback. We have had about probably 20 have something we call, which is audience input on your interviews, where stakeholder groups will watch your interviews and then fill out a form afterward about strengths and weaknesses of the 2 or 3 finalists that they noticed. And then the rest of the boards have interviewed committees and made the decisions without additional stakeholder input, because they've been comfortable enough with the input they've gathered from stakeholders in other methods to make the decision with that information in hand. I would suggest if you're going to involve stakeholders in round 2, that's better than round 1, because round 1 is too long of a day to expect stakeholders to commit 8 or 9 hours of their time. So in round 2, possibly with 2 or 3 people, we get a little concerned with an open call of people volunteering to interview or just ask questions of candidates and provide feedback, because sometimes what can happen is stakeholders have an agenda and it can stack the deck for or against candidates. If it's organized enough, they can ensure that their people are there to provide feedback to the board for or against a candidate. So the influence feels different than it would if it was a representative group of stakeholders, where you may have one high school teacher, one middle school teacher, one early childhood, one elementary, two parents, one student. I mean, that representative group maybe could interview a candidate. There's also a concern with the questions that they do ask. We worry about open mic, and I don't think that's what happened last time, Superintendent Hahn, but open mic, anyone could ask anything, including questions that are illegal in the search process.
That did happen, just so you know.
It did?
It was-
Yeah, I
they
don't
were
like this at
open.
all.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, again, I
Yeah.
open it to the whole
I'm
board,
open to the
but.
survey, getting all that information up front, but when we get to this point, we're gonna go through training, so we
It's
know
what-
what questions to ask. but
and
we're
it's
just gonna let
what we're
anybody
elected to
fire
do.
away. I think so.
Yeah, that's my take on it, is
I-
that,
Oh,
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No.
I love the idea of the putting together a separate committee, because I do think, last time that was really valuable. They just, administrators, teachers, students even saw things that I didn't necessarily see in those candidates. I thought it was really good input, and I'd love them to be part of the process and feel attached to that and have buy-in, that their voice was heard in that.
So then, devil's advocate, not saying it's a bad idea. Who picks the committee? Do I get to pick the committee? Do you pick the committee? Who picks the committee? What teachers get to be on it? Which students get to be on it? Which parents get to be on it? These committees, to the people that bark at me, they're always the same people. They're, I'm not trying to cause problems, but Heidi, I talked to you about the strategic plan when you gave us a list of business owners. Well, there was me and Ed Shaw were the only two business owners out of 15 people, 13. You're the head of this foundation, you're the head of this foundation, you're the head of this, you're the head of that. I don't want to name it out, but those aren't business owners. They don't have to make payroll. There's a difference. And so we've been elected by the community, and we're going to give them input. And when we get to that point, I'd like to see us do the online thing that you offered as an option. And if it doesn't slow us down and bog us down and move us back in 2 weeks, if we can get that done, I'd like to see, just like you're saying, what does the community looking for?
So I can say, that's when it was open to the interview, anybody from the community was allowed to come in. It was a public meeting, so it wasn't a designated committee. There was representation for like teacher committees or things like that. They looked at the levels. But when it came to the student group and the community group, it was wide open to whoever wanted to engage. And there's pros and cons to that, both for the candidate and the district.
Or
for me,
set a
the
pretty
sheer
tight-
volume of
set a tight
content that
schedule.
it generated was way too much for me to process.
Was it?
Yeah, I mean, it was, certain things stuck out, like it was neat, to Director Spear's point, to have like the student group, they'd be like, oh, so-and-so was friendly or whatever, But Barb, then if you're talking about like a situation where people view our interview and provide feedback, I mean, that feels like the middle ground. My only issue would be when you're on your third finalist interview, how is that information then disseminated to the board real time for us to begin our deliberations immediately after that third interview? How does that process work?
There's a window of time after each interview. We ask, let's say it's 12 people. We ask each of them within 15 minutes of that first interview to send through this electronic form up to 3 strengths, up to 3 weaknesses. And so that's back in St. Peter, and I have staff that are collating that into raw data for you to look at. It's usually about 2.5 pages of comments from that group. And then after the second interview, they have 15 minutes, and after that third interview, they have 15 minutes. And so it's a narrative. It's not ranking or rating these candidates. It's just telling you, I think this was an opportunity for growth for this person, or they really knocked it out of the park with this answer. How you pick those individuals is a challenge, and I have a whole list of opportunities for you to think through that, because you do want it to be representative. And by trying to be inclusive, sometimes you're unintentionally exclusive, because not everybody can participate on the day or the time you're asking. And so it is tricky. You as board members should not pick the people. You may pick the groups that send a representative on their behalf. That's possible. The other potential fly in the ointment, if you will, is not just who gets to share their thoughts with you, but what if you do something differently than what they share with you? If the people in the audience love Jane Doe and you hire John Doe, because you've seen more, You've heard more, you've read all those applications, you know what we've done our vetting on, so you've got more information upon which to make your decision. If you don't make the popular decision, you will pay the price for that from stakeholders who say, why did you ask me what I thought if you didn't hire who I thought you should hire? That's just one of those, be prepared for it if you invite that sort of feedback, which strengths and weaknesses usually doesn't. It just can, because there's some people that will like certain people better than others. Or we've actually had an instance where the stakeholder group, there was a concerted effort against one of the candidates with the people who volunteered to be on that group and were vetted, and so it skewed the results. It was not an objective process in getting feedback from those. In that case, it was 16 people. There was a campaign underway for one and against the other, and it swayed the board.
You know where I'm at on the
So
day.
it's just food for thought, but you're going to decide on April 22nd, so you can continue to let this
So we
roll
can talk
around.
about that. Get on
Right,
my
so we
list.
just set the meeting and we worry about that when we have
We
to
just
worry
gotta
about
worry
that.
about, are we gonna interview one a night? Are we gonna interview?
Right,
One
so,
night
but
a week.
MSBA's process is to interview the 3 or the finalists in one fell swoop during one day
That's how
instead.
we do it, yes, yes.
I think a candidate would like that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then to Director Donlinger's point, we're looking for a day in there that we're all available midday. So we're back to that. Really anywhere from the 8th through the 11th. I would submit that we're really looking at the 8th or 9th. And the reason for that is, I think it would be easier for whoever goes back to negotiate with the final choice
Yeah, Friday.
to be able to do that on
And
Friday.
Saturday. I'm sure they'd be happy to talk to you on Saturday if they want the job.
Yeah, but it gives you a couple of days to do that,
Yeah,
and
And then
then,
by that Monday, we had a school board meeting that Monday, actually.
13th, yeah.
yeah, so that squeezes us into that window. So my recommendation would be to look at the 8th and the 9th.
I could do either.
I'm good for either. Assuming 1:00 PM till whenever.
Or some pizzas.
Yeah.
Something fattening. You're gonna need it.
No issues with.
I'm good either.
All right, so then, since everybody's good for either day, should we squeeze it into the 8th just to give us more time to do the negotiations and
I think that's smart.
put
I
any
like that.
details to bed?
Yep, that's a good idea. So 1 PM on the 8th.
I also like DJ's idea about rather than starting at 1, starting at 11. I agree with, what he said about that.
I would be okay with that. Dr. Hana, does that give, and Barb, does that give the first finalist enough time to go through the rounds of everything?
That's a little early, depending upon how many buildings you want them to tour. They'd probably have to start by about 8 AM, 7:30. We usually
Okay.
plan 2.5 hours on
Alright.
average for a district, and then we need at least 45 minutes downtime for them to gather their thoughts and prepare for the interview. So if you start at 11, that's pretty tight you could certainly do it. It's just a little early.
Let's just start at, how about noon?
Split the difference, call it
Split it.
noon? So we do the first interview at noon?
Okay.
And then space them 2 hours apart or an hour and a half apart or whatever your norm is?
And this is to just, talk about the final interviews?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
May 8th at noon, round 2.
Yep,
May 9th, the board designee would begin negotiations.
Yep.
May 9th. Are you then anticipating approving the contract May 13th at a regular board meeting?
that would be our
Shoot
hope
for that.
unless something goes
That'd be great.
sideways.
That would be really great if you could do it on the 13th of May. I'm going to read this back and make sure I've got these correct in my notes before I make edits tonight. All right, the search preview meetings are happening on April 12th. We'll do the Q&A session probably on the 16th then, April 16th at 4 PM, but we will record that. Board interview training, et cetera, April 22nd at 5. Determining finalists, April 30th at 1. First round of interviews, May 2nd and 3rd at 4 o'clock, both days at this point. That might change depending on the number of finalists. Round 2 interviews, May 8th at noon. May 9th, negotiations begin. May 13th, regular board meeting to approve the contract. Okay, congratulations. That's the toughest part of the planning meeting. The timeline takes the longest. So I'll make those changes tonight. I will email everything back out to the board tonight for you to take a look over to make sure it's accurate. By noon tomorrow, we're going to use this timeline to publish the position, and we'd ask that it get placed on the district website after noon tomorrow sometime. Terrific, thank you very much. Whew, vacancy brochure. We have a draft in here. I want to thank the folks in the district that shared information with us in order to help put this together for your review. In looking at this, there's a couple of key pieces. The first page is your sell sheet. It's the things about your district you're most proud of, and there's a lot of wonderful things in Brainerd Public Schools. Candidates are going to want to know a little bit more about you. It's not intended to talk them into applying by any means, because they need to do their homework. They're going to go to MDE, look at your reports that you filed. They're going to go to your website and look deeply at the programs you offer and things such as that. But this would intrigue them enough to want to look further at this opportunity. I will fill in all of the search timeline information on the bottom right. The numbers by the numbers, people like to see statistics about a district. The second page is where I'd really ask for some feedback in terms of the leadership profile and salary. When you look at this, at the very bottom, there's how to apply for the position, and then my name and phone number are on this brochure. It's not just for candidates, it's for stakeholders or anyone who has questions about the process. They can reach me at that information there. The leadership profile comes from the page right after it, which has some highlighted bullets. This is the survey that all 6 of you took. Thank you very much for doing that, so you can see what really rose to the top, in addition to the information that Director Spear shared with us from the last search and the conversations the board's had up to this point. So we try to create 4 to 5 bullet points that are big picture, the kind of leader you're looking for. So I'd ask you to take a look at the left top page of that second page and let me know if that sounds like the person you would like to bring on board as your next superintendent.
You're talking about this, aren't you?
This, right here, which actually came from that.
Oh, I see.
This developed, these are more hiring criteria. This is more your leadership profile, the narrative.
So are we gonna get a chance to go back and talk about page 1 first, or at some point in time?
Absolutely. If you need additions, deletions, changes, you bet.
We just do that first?
However you'd like to
Sure,
proceed.
let's back up, John. What do you got on the initial page?
For the bullet point, ACT scores are the highest in the region. Is that still true, Superintendent Hahn?
Yes,
And 4 points above the state mean?
yes.
Okay. I just saw an article about graduation rates, and it says we are also the highest in the region in the graduation rates. I just saw an article that was not saying that.
We can go back.
I don't want to put anything out there that's inaccurate. I don't want to put anything
Yep.
out there that's
No, that's a
inaccurate.
good
That's my
point.
point.
No, you're
Um,
right, because
that's
they
a
released
one-
it last week, John, and I think these were sent prior to that,
Yep.
so.
I mean, those are 2023 graduation rates looked at individually by themselves, right? That-
Yeah, we can go back and look.
How do we know what the graduation rate is for this year? It's only the 1st of April.
So you're looking at
Last year's graduation. So the article that John's talking about had
I read
called
that
out that Pillager had the highest in the region.
Yeah. We're probably going 22 versus 23.
Again, I'm sorry. Again, it's just, accuracy when we put something out.
That's a great catch, John. I agree. Who wrote this?
We just grabbed highlights. We're looking from the communication.
Okay,
guidelines.
overall, this is fantastic. I really like it.
Yeah. Really nice, really done well. The other thing that I thought should be a bullet is the connections with CLC.
For,
Connections and collaboration with CLC, Central Lakes College.
For, what are we connected with them on?
we partner with a lot of like PSEO opportunity. It's probably our biggest connection.
I think it's a strong partnership for sure. And
Just don't know if it's-
no, I think I don't know how specific, but I like the idea of highlighting that we have a really great working relationship with our local.
I would highlight on Central Lakes College and our local YMCA, when you look at the partnership being created there.
I mean, you could put that in about the community too,
Yep.
as part of the. But yeah.
Again, I just bring that up as a possibility. I mean, that's, as I looked through this and I read through it, that's what came to my mind. So, and about the community, I'm glad you brought that up. I think that was Sarah that brought that up, because I've got some things there that I think should be re-looked at as well. Just let me read some of them. World-class outdoor recreation and resorts is what I added. Quality healthcare with specialized services and hospital care. then where it says amusement parks, go-kart tracks, public beaches, zip lines, water parks, and more. You know, my take there is to have Paul Bunyan Trail, mountain biking, curling arena, civic center, biking trails. I mean, to me, it's like the amusement parks and go-karts and all that kind of stuff are like, they're important. They absolutely are important, but I think that our area provides a lot more with, you know, like I said, Paul Bunyan Trail, and
Biking.
I just wanted to review all those with all of you.
Yeah. These came from the chamber, so, but I think too, John, you could talk about the Arboretum.
Well, just remember that the person who's applying for this job is gonna research it. And number two is, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't even, you know, they'll probably read the whole thing, cause it's pretty quick. But, you know, it's like you've only got their attention for so long before they're on their computer figuring out what they're looking for anyways. I wouldn't get too hung up on the amenities that we're gonna, you know what I'm saying? I wouldn't get
Okay,
too-
I just,
Yeah,
okay,
like-
I get it.
I like though as an adult, I'm looking more for that rec opportunity as an adult compared to an amusement park. or
Yeah,
go-kart,
and
like
it's
the
right, I never thought
community.
about the curling or the mountain biking, cause it's pretty awesome mountain.
Those are all really great ideas. I think if we can still keep it in the one-page format and fit all, as much of that in as possible, that would be where my head goes.
Absolutely.
And I guess that's a better way of putting it. I think that was Superintendent Hahn that said, you know, I tried to gear more for an adult rather than a kid. I think that's what I was getting at.
Good idea.
And I think in the district, we didn't highlight that we have a planetarium, that we have a school forest, and there's some highlights missing in there too. Do we get those to you?
I
Barb?
was also wondering about, oh, excuse me. I was wondering about our early childhood programs that we offer. Is that something exceptional? It seems to me it is in our district.
The early
Or are
childhood-
they, is it pretty,
Well, no, and then I think that family education is the other facet too.
right, right?
Yeah.
How far east does the district go? Is Garrison in our school district?
You have to
The
look
edge
at
of
the
it
map,
is.
the edge of it is, we go all the way out to.
The town itself isn't.
Yeah. We really like touch almost to Little Falls, we touch almost to Pierce, it's 516 square miles. So it's
But
a really
Garrison's not included in our school district. Okay, just what, because I was just looking at the cities and.
North of Nisswa.
Just about on the edge of Pequot.
You know where Highway 29 is? That's the line.
These are all excellent suggestions. Thank you very much. And thank you, Director Ward, for bringing it to our attention. I think there's a couple of areas I could save some room because Superintendent Hahn, if you would be able to send me some of the new phrasing, I heard planetarium, school forest, early childhood education, family education, the partnerships with Central Lakes College and YMCA. If I could get those tonight before like 9:30, I'm going to be working on this tonight when I get back in the office, and I want it back in front of the board tomorrow morning. So you have until noon to catch any typos or corrections. Otherwise, we want this to go live at noon tomorrow as well.
Gotcha.
So we're under a little bit tight time frame.
So in other words, the takeaway is that the team here at the district will spruce this up, get it over to Barb. She'll get it out to the six of us in a blind copy format so everybody can review, get comments back to her on anything. I would say, you know, to the extent possible, let's not re-engineer it, but if there's typos or a bullet point that really sticks in your craw, call it out. Otherwise, let's not reinvent the wheel too much beyond, I think the suggestion we had now were great, but there's a point where you can stop polishing a diamond.
And it's amazing how much more room I can create by wordsmithing. For example, already I can see the first bullet. I'm going to take out the word of Minnesota. Award-winning district in the state. That gets a whole nother line we can get in there. Over 60 varsity sports and student clubs. If I take out different, that's up to one line.
So my team in my private sector world would like to have you follow me around when I'm writing stuff.
Succinctness, right? We'll take out give students opportunities to earn college credit. That's another line. So I now have 3 more lines I can put stuff in here, but usually we have to eliminate some things. But I think there's some prepositional phrases and some, I don't know what the word would be, extra words I can take out and still get the gist of what's important about the district in there, as well as about the community. And I do think you're right about the adult, you know, hiking, biking, all of those things are great opportunities, so we'd pull out that last bullet and just.
Oh, we might as well put
fit
in that
some
we
things
have all
in
these
there.
great golf courses, and then we could say that we have boat dealers. and
Oh,
we have
golfing.
Absolutely.
We got a lot of stuff around here. I mean, we
Yeah.
could do some good
Golfing.
stuff.
Chevrolet dealership, I mean, hey, you
Got
know,
old
everything.
people,
Yeah.
softball. Randy might be your coach, or the ump, or who knows what it'll be.
Great changes on the front page. Thank you
Yeah.
very much, and thanks
Okay.
already, Superintendent.
That
I
sounds good, then
appreciate
we'll
it.
watch for that tomorrow
By,
morning.
by the numbers, is the student enrollment accurate?
Yes.
Okay, and do we still have deans?
No, it's just assistant principal, so you could cross out.
So you can cross out four
deans.
deans.
Perfect, and I'll spell out assistant.
No, we have
then.
4 assistant principals, we do not have deans.
Okay, so principals / assistant principals.
Correct.
Cross off word
Oh,
deans.
just-
Or
Or
deans, yep,
Yep, okay.
correct, and I can probably spell out assistant then.
All right,
Thank you.
just to reiterate, so everybody on the board's aware, you will see an email from Barb tomorrow morning with this, and if you missed the window by, say, 11 o'clock or whatever it is that her deadline, imposed deadline is, that's, speak now or forever hold your peace sort of stuff.
Correct.
Well, I could find some more lines we can get rid of.
That's okay.
On the second page, we on the second page?
Sure.
We can
if
be,
you're-
yep.
if you
I think
Ready?
we're closed out on that, yep.
I don't understand why we has experience with school finance, bond or operating levies, and transparent stewardship of taxpayer investments. I mean, if that's just is to polish it up to make it sound nice, it sounds great. But if you look at our survey, it just says experience in school finance, and I don't know why you would need any more than that. Would we wanna eliminate someone from applying for the job if they'd never tried to pass an operating referendum? Or if they'd never been through a bonding situation? We certainly have the people here that can help train them
Sure.
to learn that side of the business. So, I mean, I don't know. Barb, you're the expert. So if that's
This is
what
your
should be
profile.
in there, let's leave it the way it is. That's fine with me. I mean, it's not bad. I just, like, well, geez, I've never really dealt with the bond side of things, Maybe this is about my pay grade, I don't wanna apply. It could be our perfect candidate and we've shoved him aside. We certainly need some finance ability, cause it's a big school and a big machine. And it takes some talent.
I mean, I get the less is more, believe it or not. I know
Do you?
all evidence to the contrary. Listen, you and I talking about this is kind of ironic, really.
That's just how I think.
No, I get where you're going. I would say, if I was gonna
weed
read,
out the applications before we get them.
I would, if I was gonna rewrite it, I would write it has experience with school finance and funding, however you wanna wordsmith that, to talk about funding options for, because in my mind, that's inclusive of those different things without mentioning them by name.
We're gonna be transparent.
Yep.
I mean, our stuff's in every meeting. It's like, you wanna see it, it's there. There's nothing that's not transparent about it. So it's kinda saying things to say things instead of really having any teeth. But I'm not an expert at this, so somebody thinks I'm wrong. Let's just go with
Where
it.
did these words come from?
I think they wrote them.
It started with this.
Yep.
And then we've also just gotten some communications from board members with things that they feel are important in the profile, and we tried to weave those in.
Okay.
That doesn't mean it's all 6 of you, however, so you can take out whatever doesn't feel right to the 6 of you. It's a similar thought, and I want to bring this up if it's okay, Director Dowling, because the experience is preferred but not required also is something that you could choose to completely leave out. It is preferred but not required because on this survey, 2 of you said yes and 4 of you said no. So it's clear there's a preference, but you don't want to require it. We've had some boards say, you know what, I don't even want to mention it because if someone doesn't even have superintendent experience, they might be a phenomenal leader, so we don't even want to include those 2 sentences or that 1 sentence. It's the same kind of thing, less is more, by not mentioning it. People might feel they're qualified because they're not seen as a preferential thing.
I thought this was just an example and we were gonna work through these questions. So I read these and I was like, oh, you know what I mean? It's like, this whole collaborative decision-making practices.
Okay, well, do we wanna just tackle them bullet by bullet then and just get to where we have 6 people that are comfortable with the verbiage on each one?
Sure.
You can also just use these bullets without putting them in paragraph format. You could do that too, and then there'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6
Yeah, we're
bullets.
looking for a visionary, creative thinker with experience in school finance. I don't know why we have to do all this.
I would agree.
Wordsmithing.
That's where I'm at. How about Directors Ward and Brecken again? I know you guys are trying to look at this on your screen while also using your device, so it's a little trickier. So I think what I heard Barb say was that we go to the sheet, the qualification sheet that has all the highlights in yellow on all the different things we chose, and to list those verbatim off of that sheet in a kind of a laundry list of the things we selected. So they're much, much shorter and less loquacious and,
Well, you possibly
So
could
what would be
combine
the-
two of them as well.
huh?
I mean, you can combine, like a visionary creative thinker who acts with honesty in an ethical manner with school board staff and community. One bullet point.
And strategic planning.
That's a strategic plan.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
part of that statement. I mean, I love the way you've added a little detail to these, and I was one of the people that got back to you and asked for a little more detail on one or two of them. One of them being the school finance experience. And I do think, obviously, if you live and work in a school, you've dealt with bonds and referendums because that's school finance in every situation, whether it's an operating levy or a building, whatever it is. So I guess it's not that important because I would guess most people have experienced that. But I like the detail of some of these just because it gives the perception that we've thought a lot about this and we've added enough detail to say experience with finance. And what we mean by that is that you know about these things. So I don't mind that additional. Don't tell anybody that I work with that I said I like the additional words because that will not go over well. I like more succinct, but in this case, I think it's helpful for the candidate to see that.
As a candidate, I'd be seeking more detail, because if you just say school finance, that's a very, very broad topic on $100+ million budget. So what is it about your school finance? What is it about, you know, that collaboration or that visionary that you're looking for? Because again, those are, for lack of a better term, catchphrases.
Yeah, that's exactly what they are.
So give the detail of what you want would be, as candidates are looking.
Well, collaborative is a catchphrase.
okay, but we're still stuck in bullet one, right?
Yes, when I see transparent stewardship of taxpayer investments, that tells me something about what this board believes and what this district believes, and maybe experiences that have led to that statement, or, you know, how we arrived on that being important.
Well, what it is it's regurgitating a priority that we identified, or at least some of us or
It's
identified.
flushed out in the interview.
Yep.
So on the qualification sheet, we have one experience in school finance, which has 5 of us respond to that. So one of my questions is, and I agree with Sarah, I actually like the bullets, but there's a couple things that I think need to be just changed with them. I think they're worded very well. I think it tells a lot about us. But so so we got 5, we got 1 5, we got 3 4s and 2 3s. I'm assuming that the 1s and the 2s aren't that important or whatever. That's just my assumption. So are all those 5, 4, and 3s included in this leadership profile?
Yes.
That's what I thought. Okay, so the other thing so on a second bullet, experience with strategic planning, well, I think we're missing the word implementation because we just spent almost 2 years on strategic planning and we got it done. And so I think the word implementation needs to be in there myself. And then the other comment that I'd like to make, leadership profile, is we've been, for 2 years now, the 6 of us have been talking about literacy and behavior issues. And I don't relate anything in there to literacy. I know it talks about curriculum and I see all of that, but I wanted to kind of be more specific in the leadership profile about literacy and behavior, but that could be a interview question as well. So I just throw those out there for comments.
I think it's an excellent point, John, though. I totally get where you're coming from. All right, so again, just in the interest of getting this to where we can get to a final draft of this that everybody can get their heads around with the idea that this is meant to be informational for a candidate to understand what our priorities are as a group of 6.
So let me ask a question. We would hire somebody, bullet point 3, I know I'm breaking the rules, is a person of high moral character. So we're gonna hire somebody that doesn't have high moral character? I mean, it's just like, what is that? Like, really? We're looking for somebody with low moral character. Like, we're looking for, man, if you've been in jail a few times, if you're kind of a crook, have a little larceny in your blood, we are the school district for you. I mean, it's just like, this is just, it's the education world. I understand. I don't get it, but this stuff here is like, I'm out. You know?
That's what I call the well, duh kind of point.
That's what I say.
Acts with honesty and ethical manner. It's like, well, duh.
So if I'm
And
looking at this job, I'm like, who are these people?
it's in there for almost every profile for a simple reason,
Oh,
is
there you
that
go. It
if,
just shows up.
if a
Right.
candidate sees that and they have a questionable background, or they know that if we Google them, there'll be something a little questionable, they might not apply for your position.
Well, they
It
know
is
that
a
we're
well-
gonna Google them.
It's a well, duh kind of thing. I agree. Most boards choose to have it in there, even though it seems to be obvious, and yet you do not have to have it in your profile.
It kind of is steering the type of candidates we're looking for. Instead of going with a visionary, creative thinker, we have honesty and ethical manner. We didn't say high moral character. We said honesty in an ethical manner.
Yeah, I think you could pull that phrase out.
I think we could just simplify things, but whatever. You know, language is powerful. And that's what we got going on here, so.
Well, I mean, what if, so it's bullet point 3, so I'm gonna help you break the rules. What if we just said, is a person that acts in, and take the person of high moral character out?
There you go.
You like it?
Yeah. We are
Look at
working with
me,
students
all of a
instead.
sudden I can shorten stuff, write it down somewhere. Because I think you could do the same thing with the first bullet point. If the objection is bond or operating levies, you could just take that out.
Well, I think it's
School
hilarious
finance and
that we're
funding
gonna put
mechanisms.
Transparent stewardship of taxpayer investments. Oh my, oh, thank you very much. I mean, you're gonna, because you're under a microscope. I mean, can you imagine? Let Heidi's gonna go through, you know?
Okay, so bullet point number 1 has experience with school finance and funding mechanisms. I'd leave it at that.
I would say educational funding mechanisms.
Yep, because then you're talking about not just what's available to you as a superintendent, but understanding how the state stuff works too, right? And the federal stuff.
Which is pretty important.
Yep.
Yep.
Everybody okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
All right, and then, so to mollify or to incorporate Director Ward's suggestions, how about this for bullet 2? Is a visionary, creative, instructional leader who promotes a culture of innovation and has experience with the implementation of strategic plans.
Perfect.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, and then we already fixed bullet point 3. Next would be, this is the tricky one because we want, I actually kind of agree with Director Ward. I would like to at least allude to the priorities of
Literacy.
student support, student behavior, and literacy. So how do we work that in there?
First of all, I can't imagine anyone's gonna apply for the job that doesn't possess a strong academic background. So you could say you need to have a background in, I mean, if you're trying to figure out how to get this behavior and all this stuff in there.
So you want to just chop off the front part of
Well, I
that?
mean, you could shorten it up so you could put some different words. in.
Possesses
Give you some
strong
space.
ability to support student achievement using data-driven decision-making practices to support student achievement, which is already mentioned, but we can fix that.
Aren't they gonna use
Behavior.
data-driven? Isn't it gonna be data-driven? Are we gonna have test scores and isn't that what we're looking for and stuff? I mean,
Yeah, you can pull that, I guess.
well, it's gonna be data-driven. You know, it's just talking to talk in my brain.
But I think it sets the tone for what our expectation is too.
That
I
our-
think
the
it,
results are good.
Well, and we also
Well,
don't
I
want
mean,
somebody to come in
just
and fly by the seat of
that
their
there,
pants.
yeah, that there's expectations and this is the kind
Sure.
of district we are and these things are important to us.
Well, and I think the data-driven, if I'm being honest, to me, is important because it's sending 2 messages. It's sending one to the candidate, but we also know everybody in the community is watching this, and it's important in my mind that the community understand that what we're looking for is somebody who's gonna look at the data we have available and make decisions based on that data. So as much as a third of the town might think this and a third of the town might think this, that we're gonna go where the data takes us, not what 3,000 people think. That's kind of where my head was when I read it.
It's not bad. I mean, you can live with the whole thing if you want. I just think a lot of it's like,
Could we change it to possesses a strong academic background with experience in curriculum and student support?
Sure.
And achievement?
Does that get to the stuff you were concerned about, John?
Yes.
Okay.
Heidi, do you have a background in curriculum?
I have a lot of experience in curriculum.
Do you?
So, and I've learned a lot with standards-based.
Do all the principals have that?
Yes, we have really focused on instructional leadership. So I think that's the message you want to send. There's some people who come in and they can be very good managers, right? So they can manage a large system, they can manage a large personnel, they can manage a budget. But do you want that management to be, like, to me, everything should focus on student achievement. So wanting that instructional leader and being able to define what is instructional leadership.
I think that we need to get that out of there. I'm not disagreeing with you, Dr. Hahn, I very respect you, but I want to see candidates. I don't want them to be picked out because they came out the other side of the business.
Sure. I get what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying?
Anybody,
Like,
I mean,
I'd like
because
to
again, if
see-
we've identified the priorities as student achievement, whatever they're, I get to your point.
There's three large things happening in the state right now that a system needs to be cognizant of. So you've heard the terms MTSS, right? It's the multi-tiered system of sports. So there's statutory requirements now that are around that rather than just concepts and ideas. Our READ Act, so we've all focused on the literacy achievement piece. So again, that's an instructional piece. And the third part is going to touch special ed. So it's how students are qualifying. So there's a discrepancy model that's now being sunset. So there's a lot of instructional leadership that's going to be required to how are you qualifying students for those specialized services, no longer by an achievement test and IQ test. So that's some of the instructional that you, again, up to the board, but as a leader, how do you support the instructional leaders in the buildings and your teaching and learning department and those facets to lead that work? As well as possessing. I mean, when you look at the competencies of a superintendent, they're all in there. Curriculum and instruction is a competency, finance is a competency, policy and law is a competency. There's lots of.
I know there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. But again, but all those skills, they all rise to a certain priority based on what the district needs.
Well, there's more than one way to skin a cat. So, for example, the new FTC rules all started last June. Do you think that we hired somebody like Ryan to figure that out? No, I hired Kevin Boyles' company because he's got all the experts and he's got all the specialists and he comes and shows me my options. And I'm the guy that hopefully makes the right decision. I don't need to figure out how to be compliant. I just need to make sure we are compliant, right? And so I'd like to see those people that may have a different idea of, like we've done. Well, Tim told me that we have written a lot of our curriculums in-house because we didn't have the money to buy it outside. Right? Am I correct on that? Yeah. Well, then maybe this person is like, we're all done doing curriculum in here. Like, we're gonna go to the experts. We're gonna see whose scores are this, how their kids are faring, how their mental health status is, who's getting the most kids back out of special ed into regular ed. That, I'm just making all this up, right? I'm just saying, I'd like to be able to at least interview or see if somebody can make it to the final six that maybe had a different way of looking at running things than the way it's been done in Brainerd for the last 30 years. I'm not saying it was done poorly. I would just like to have the opportunity to hear what somebody else thinks about that. And we may all be like, wow, that's a pretty good idea. You know what I'm saying? But if I came up through the other side of it and didn't come through the curriculum side of things, I might be like, well, geez, this school, I just don't want to limit our opportunities to see people.
So I don't think that's limiting. Like, you can have somebody who has a background in curriculum, like the candidate I came back through mental health and special ed. Like, I wasn't a teacher, director, teaching learner. I came that pathway. So I mean, there's different avenues. I don't think by saying that having, you could say instructional leadership, but experience in that. I mean, that's, if you're about students and what students are learning, curriculum is a big part of that.
Well, I'm about students, or I wouldn't have ran for the school board.
Exactly. So when you're in the world, that's what.
This may
That
seem
word
kind of
means-
stupid, but I think we can kind of fix it with removing one word. So, believe it or not, it's not the word you think it is, though.
Probably not.
Hear me out.
Oh, there you go.
Possesses a strong academic background with experience in curriculum, comma, supporting, or student achievement, comma, MTSS, comma, student behavior. And then I think, curriculum's one of several items that we're looking for in that bullet instead of the focal point of the bullet. Because I think to your point, the reason the bullet reads the way it does is because of what we filled out. We have a 4 on possesses a strong academic background with experience in curriculum. I mean, it's not a mystery how that got in there.
I think I just talked
Right.
about it too, actually.
But I think we can mitigate it by making it part of a menu choice, and then it's still something we're looking for, but it's not focused around that. It's focused
it's
around
just-
that menu of different things. Would that make, is that acceptable, John, Michelle?
Do you want to read it again?
Sure, I mean, it's kind of Frankenstein, but the way I would word it is something like this: possesses a strong academic background with experience in curriculum, student achievement, MTSS, student behavior, and literacy, and uses data-driven collaborative decision-making practices.
Great.
I agree.
I like that.
Yep.
You guys are gonna miss me in 9 months.
We'll just call you. Zoom you in.
I missed you last week.
Oh, I was hanging out with 21 million of my favorite people. All right, so for me, the final bullet, actually, I kind of like it. So I'm good with any changes somebody might have, but I feel like it's extremely articulate.
It's good.
Okay.
Do you want previous superintendent experience preferred but not required?
My hot take is get it out.
Get it out.
Mine too.
Take it out.
I think the idea, to Director Donlinger's point, that there may be somebody out there that's got really strong expertise in a number of different areas, but just hasn't been, I mean, would we turn away
Assistant superintendent?
yeah, or somebody that was in a decent sized system outstate or in the Twin Cities or something that has deep experience that just wasn't the soup. I think it limits us in the beginning. I think if that's something that's important to us as individuals, we can address that when we interview these people.
Yeah, exactly. We can weed them out. Just nice to have options.
May I read back my notes to make sure I've got it right before I get back tonight?
Yeah.
Okay. First bullet, has experience with school finance and educational funding mechanisms. Is a visionary, creative, instructional leader who promotes a culture of innovation and has experience with the implementation of strategic plans. Is a person who acts in an honest and ethical manner at all times and ensures support for the well-being of all students and staff. Possesses a strong academic background with experience in curriculum, student achievement, MTSS, student behavior, student behavior and literacy, and uses data-driven collaborative decision-making practices. Okay, and then the last bullet as is. Develops and directs an effective leadership team, motivates others, has strong skills in relationship building, and authentically communicates across the district.
You know, Boyles, you were rolling. You were saving a lot of ink there for a while, and then that last one, you just,
Okay,
I had to revert to
Knock them
form.
all back
I can only
All
bucket
your
for so
words
long,
back.
my friend.
and on the very first opening paragraph, if I have room, I'm going to add the word student-centered. The Brainerd Public School Board seeks a student-centered superintendent with strong leadership skills who, if you want student-centered in the opening sentence, and we could even take out with strong leadership skills if you'd rather have student-centered superintendent.
definitely want strong leadership stuff.
Okay, is that more important? Because if I don't have room for it, I'll just keep out the student-centered because you do mention students a couple of other times. Okay,
Dr. Hahn, just real quick, if you look at this, is there anything that we're glaringly missing that,
No, like, as a candidate, I would look at this page in particular, because this is how I'm gonna prepare myself to start getting ready to research and learn more about the district. So I would learn and see these priorities and then go back and say, okay, now I'm gonna go look at this report card, I'm gonna go look at standards-based reporting, how are they doing that? I'm gonna look at where they're at in the MTSS. I mean, there's things that a candidate should start looking for to help prepare himself or herself to come interview. So broad
nothing
enough,
missing?
but I also think there's wiggle room if there's, a strength area that candidate should be able to highlight that and bring that right in.
You know, the front page, it's from the chamber, which I think makes a lot of sense, because we're thinking that, well, if you're in Minnesota, we know we have the lakes, we have this, well, what if you're from Rapid City, South Dakota? What if you're from Arkansas? I mean, you don't know anything about this area, so I think it's a good, that first page, doing all that stuff we found there, I think it makes a lot of sense. If you're from Monticello, you probably know.
Yeah.
If you're from Bemidji, if you're in the state, you probably know. So we're thinking, I think it's.
And then all joking aside, on page 2, there is obviously we added some words and subtracted some words, but what I like about the finished product that Barb read back is we have a lot of common ground that 6 of us sit on, and we have some divergent thoughts. And I think the divergent thoughts are all represented in there without getting in the way of somebody else's, right? Especially that 4th bullet. I think what we did with that really is a catch-all that gets things that are important to all 6 of us.
I think you're right. Good job.
All right.
Can I just,
Yay, board.
I want to mention something. The 4th bullet possesses a strong academic background with experience. I feel like with all those topics that we listed, who has experience in all of that? Should we say with knowledge? Or do we expect them to have experience with MTSS, literacy, student achievement, curriculum? I don't know, it's just a thought. It seems that's a very all-inclusive list, and who has experience in all of those areas, but they should have knowledge in all of them.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the words are synonymous, Michelle. What would bother me is if we'd use the
Okay.
word expertise.
Okay, I can go.
I mean, it's
can live with
semantics,
that.
but if I was writing it, I would probably leave that the way it was to make people challenge themselves and see if they've had some experience with it. Because if you have
And-
somebody that's never heard of MTSS, I don't know if that's our candidate.
Probably not.
Right.
But they're out of staters, would they know what MTSS is, Heidi? Yeah.
They should.
It's
It's,
a
I
big
mean, it's
education.
not a,
I've
it's
read
not
about
a
it.
new. 'Cause
Director
it's-
Ward, go ahead.
Do it here.
Well, I was just gonna say, Michelle, and board members, if it was me applying and I had experience in, 2 of them, or 3 of them, I would highlight those and, and then try to say what I'm going to do with the other ones that I'm not as experienced in.
Okay.
I think it's important for all of us to have all of those things in there because just like Kevin said, it covers all of our concerns, in my
Right.
opinion.
Right. But yeah, it would be pretty difficult for somebody to have
Right.
expertise, I guess, in all of those areas. So, okay, I can live with that.
And I think we would probably just go to one candidate at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be somebody at a school district with 120 kids. Yeah, I did all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
also drove bus and cooked lunches.
And there's some who have done that.
I will make all of those changes and include them in my email to the board for you to look at.
That's
And if
awesome,
you
Barb.
Don't
Thank
get
you.
back to me before noon tomorrow. We're going with whatever I send you. And who should I send this to in the district? I'm sending everything currently to Kelly and Heidi to get it
Kelly's out.
posted on the
Kelly's out,
website.
So you're gonna need to send it, and I think I'll give you a new name to,
Okay,
our communications person to get on the website, so.
okay. And then should I copy you and Kelly, just
I
so
would-
you know it went out?
Yes.
Okay. Great, thank you.
And now you've officially met our board.
I have officially met your board. Nice to meet you all. That was a great conversation. We want to make sure this brochure reflects you. And I think you're
Yes.
absolutely right. It's a nice piece that reflects multiple perspectives as well as commonalities, which I think is great. Okay, that's the bulk of the meeting. The rest of this doesn't take as long, but I do want to talk about salary verbiage for a moment. If you put aside this list, which was just your results of the survey, and go to the salary language options, did you prefer 1, 2, 3, or 4? We need to put something in the brochure. Any of these?
In
work?
my opinion,
Go ahead,
excuse me,
John.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I rated those, Barb and board members. The number 3, I rated as number 1. The number 2, I rated as number 2. The last one I rated as number 3, and the first one I rated as number 4.
I like option 4.
I like option 4. Well,
Yeah, I'm good with 3 or 4.
yeah, that's fine too. I'm not sure, Heidi, what is that what everyone's
That's us.
dying about? I mean, if you look at the range that they sent us, it's all about the same, so I don't think there's gonna be any big surprises there.
Well, it's not gonna be a massive range.
Well, if you look at the stuff they sent us, it's like, there's not much difference.
There's not.
So they kinda know where they're gonna be, so why even put it in there?
Well, actually, there's a range between 140,000 and 205,000 right
Right.
now.
Mhm.
I mean, they're gonna look
So
at the
there is
same
a-
numbers we're looking
Throw out
at.
the
Yeah.
145, you throw out the 205, and they're all
So-
between
and I-
179 and 188.
So I've been fielding calls and things as well, and people have said, can you send me a copy of your contract? I say, sure. It's public data, so,
Yeah.
so I think people who've been inquiring,
They already know.
they already know. But it's not a secret.
Barb, what kind of feedback do you get from
Yeah, what's your experience?
applicants and/or districts on including that salary range at all?
A lot of pros and cons to all of these. So the first one is actually the most common districts choose because it's factual and people will find it out anyway. So they feel like it's a safe bet to just say the current superintendent's contract base salary is. I mean, that's
with that.
factual. The second one, people don't use as much because then you have to discuss amongst yourself and decide what the floor is. And it might be too low for some people who are interested, even though you're willing to go 40,000 higher, they don't know that. So having a floor like that makes some candidates not apply. The third one, the difficulty with that is that you do box yourself in. If you find a phenomenal person that's willing to take less than you think, or someone who's so good, but they're 10,000 higher than your top of the range. And so you sometimes lose candidates with number 3. And number 4 is the catch-all. People do like a number, and they can certainly call and get a copy of the contract. They call us, we have a copy of it already, so they can certainly find out. It just saves them a step to know what she's already making. And then they have to take into consideration if they have more or less experience than your current superintendent, where they're coming from in terms of the size of their district. We've had superintendents outside of the metro take a pay cut. If they're a principal in the metro and paid more, they'll take a pay cut to become a superintendent. So numbers matter to people, but it's not the main reason people take this job. Your reputation is usually the first thing they're looking for. Reputation, location, you can't beat that, and salary probably are the 3 things people are looking for. So any of these will work. I'd say there's some risk with 2 and 3, unless you have some very stringent budget constraints and you
Let's do
can't
1 or
go
4.
above a number.
Well, I gotta confess, I read one wrong.
You didn't realize it was what we're currently paying?
Yeah, I thought we were declaring what
I could live with either.
I like
Those are
one,
my
actually.
two.
I do
like
too.
number
I
4 the
like
best,
that.
but
One's my favorite.
one's fine.
Yep, mine too.
How about you, Director Ward? What do you think? You live with
Well,
number
after
one?
hearing what Barb said, I like number 4.
We are on the same team again, Wardo. What do you think, Randy?
1 or 4 doesn't make any, that's fine.
All right, why
They
don't we just do a
already know.
hand vote on it and just pick one?
They already know the number. I
So
mean, if they
show of
wanna-
hands for number 1,
I mean,
show of hands for number 4. It's not on the record anywhere, but you went down 5-1, Jono.
I rolled over on you.
Are you sure you saw my hand?
I did, I saw it, I did. We didn't count fingers, just hands.
And the number we'll put in there will be 182,070. And I just got an email from Amy that we did also get information from 2 more districts.
Yep,
And so I'm gonna
printed it
send,
out.
on top of the
Well,
ones
I
I
mean,
sent
you
you
got
at
it.
4 o'clock, 3
Yeah.
o'clock today,
Oh,
I'll send you
okay.
one more that includes an additional 2 districts.
Oh, you just got another one now.
Got another 2 more. So I'll send that in an email, so you can certainly use that. I think as you negotiate your contract, that's good information to have. So, okay, perfect.
just kind of interesting though, that St. Michael
Bring 2
Albertville,
bottles of water. I
the
got it.
salary
yeah.
that they have.
All right, so go ahead, Director Hyman.
I find that fascinating too.
Oh, I was just looking at the ranges here, and I'm looking at St. Michael Albertville, and the salary that they're paying seems awfully low compared to other districts. So,
Maybe there's some
They got
other
a
really
bargain.
fantastic benefits included.
Maybe
Yeah, I
this
mean,
was-
there's a
who
number of
knows
things
what
that
the-
can
yeah,
influence.
that's
All right,
true.
so we're gonna take like a 5-minute recess for a potty break.
Actually,
Or do
that
we
was
have
an
enough?
old number. It's in red. That's an old number for St. Michael Albertville.
oh, okay.
I've got an updated one for you, which is 175.
Okay.
This is the one I emailed to you at about 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
But since that time, we've gotten information from St. Cloud and Little Falls. So that's what I'll send you tonight. So, yes.
Right.
St. Michael Albertville was an old number in red. And then Sauk Rapids Rice is also now 192.5.
All right,
Those 2 ones in red change.
so let's take a 5-minute recess so everybody both back in the saddle?
Nope, the
Nope.
saddle accepted.
Neither one. There-
Okay, well, we gotta talk about what? We talked about the search timeline, right? That's done, right?
Yeah,
Hiring criteria is done, right?
Vacancy brochure is done.
Have we talked about stakeholder involvement yet?
that's the next thing on the agenda, actually, on Barb's list anyway.
Okay. And procedures.
All right, we're just waiting for Director Ward, and once he is ensconced in his, there he is.
There he is, he's back.
All right, seeing all 6 board members back in place and Barb in place, we will come out of recess and resume our conversation, please. Back to you, Barb.
Thank you. So stakeholder input, we have circled around already as part of the conversation, so this won't take too long. I did cross out qualification survey because as you know from the proposal, having the recent information from your search as well as strategic planning, we took a $3,000 discount off of the fee. So we're not doing that survey up front. I wanted to ask if you wanted us to try to do focus groups, listening sessions, or survey groups as part of the next 2 weeks of activities. And if so, the next page in your packet where it says stakeholder input, at the bottom of this, it spells out sort of the pros and cons of doing those focus groups and listening sessions. They are also one of the traditional methodologies that I mentioned have fallen by the wayside a bit during superintendent searches. One of the reasons is people who are able to attend those listening sessions and focus groups are generally heard twice because they attend those and they take the survey. And it's one of those things that people who are unable to come because of the timing or transportation or childcare or language, whatever it might be, they don't have the opportunity to participate. So people do get excluded by doing focus groups sometimes. The intention's to include more. And so I wanted to say, if you want us to do it, we will charge per group for those. All of our searches have this as an option. It's not just because you're on a condensed timeline. And so far this year, I think we're on 24 searches. To this point, we've not yet done any listening sessions or focus groups, other than with some students. We did some student focus groups in the metro. Otherwise, we have not, but I wanted to make sure that you officially do or don't want us to do those in the next 2 weeks.
Open the floor to discussion, please.
I would prefer to have a survey sent out, myself speaking, to the entire school district, all people,
Not just the school district.
all people within the school district,
So is the online survey, would that hold us up and change?
or
our
an
rate?
online.
The online survey would hold us up because
would,
we
huh?
didn't plan to do it, because it was in the proposal that we would not do it because of the condensed search timeline with the survey. That's why we took off the $3,000.
I understand why you took $3,000 off, but
Right.
nobody asked me about it, and no one told me how long it was gonna take.
Yep,
And so I have just as much of a vote as anyone else here.
absolutely.
And no one ever talked to me about any of this, so who decided that we weren't gonna do it? Because I thought that that was my job, and that's why I'm sitting here, because I thought that I was supposed to kind of help make these decisions.
You can do it.
And I, just jumping in, on my understanding of how we arrived there was, a couple of years ago, when we went through this process, we did the stakeholder and listening sessions and surveys, and then last year, with the strategic plan, we went through all of those groups as well, so felt like we had a pretty good handle on what was important to the community as we're looking at leadership and priorities in the school district.
Yeah.
But if we feel like there's something we haven't yet uncovered or we're missing, I totally understand that.
Well, can you just walk us through the online survey?
Sure.
I
We
mean,
would,
how many questions is it? Is it kind of like you did with us?
no, that's one page of it. It's actually about 5 pages. And it includes the overview of, are you a student, staff, parent, community member? So you pick who you are as far as which hat you wear. And then there's questions about, please rate the top 6 areas of expertise you feel the next superintendent should have. And then there's maybe 15 things that are listed. The same ones tend to rise to the top for every district we do, which tends to be budget and finance, collaborative leadership, curriculum and development, but we want people to have the opportunity to tell us what's most important. We ask about personal characteristics, and there's maybe another 15 that are listed: personable, transparent, problem solver, sense of humor, personal characteristics. Then there's that page that you all took, identical. So this would be an apples to apples page in that survey. And then there's 4 open-ended questions where we say, what are some of the good things currently happening in Brainerd Public Schools? What are some of the challenges you see ahead in the next 5 years? What does the next superintendent need to know about the history of the district and community in order to be successful? And what else do you want to tell us? The reason that we recommended not doing it was in the interest of time, and because I know Paula O'Loughlin really well, and she and I are meeting to talk about the results that came from the strategic planning focus groups, which very often focus on opportunities and threats, much like our qualitative questions in our survey. So we didn't know if it was as necessary in this case. If you had a traditional 3 months, maybe 3.5 month timeline, it's always a part of our searches. Just at the end of search season, it's the one thing we do leave out due to cost and time. And if it's right on the heels of a strategic planning process, those are districts that usually ask us to leave it out. But we could have it going live by, what is today, Tuesday or Wednesday?
Tuesday.
We could have it live probably by Friday, and it would be online through the same communications channels about the Q&A session being announced to everybody. We could only leave it open for 1 week if you'd like us to, and try to get the results back to you before the 22nd. Was that the meeting we had? April 22nd.
4/22, 4/22.
We need to have it before then, probably, it would need to close at least 4 or 5 days before then so that we have time to go through the results and create the summary report for you. The raw data is not particularly helpful for boards because it's just a lot of stuff. You have access to the raw data if you want to. I've not yet in 5 years had a board ask for the raw data because it does include a lot of stuff that needs to be redacted if you have a data request for it. But the summary is an overview of what people said quantitatively with the top 6 kind of things, and a summary of the themes that emerged from the online open-ended questions as well. So we want to close it probably by the 19th, 18th or 19th, and, oh wait, no, 22nd. I want to close it sooner than that so we have time to do the report. I'd also like to send it to you at least a day or 2 in advance so you can read it before the 22nd and come prepared with questions.
Second is our interview training.
That's when we usually do the stakeholder summary report as well.
Well, I talked to one of the Hastings board members, and she communicated to me that she worked with you and said that this survey really kept the board going back the right direction. So I thought it might be something worth, $3,000 if you think about it.
And I can say,
Quite the commitment, huh?
just to give background for like what Barb will meet with Paula O'Loughlin on. So when we did strategic planning, we had almost 20 different listening sessions opportunities, both in person and virtual. And then we did large stakeholder groups. We also did surveys. So we had student survey, we had community survey, we had staff survey. So there's a large pool of data there that's sitting there. So I know that was part of the discussion, but I want to say it was over 20 opportunities of input.
I didn't mean that we were stifling input. I just think it's 2 totally different things. The job for the Minnesota Vikings coach is to win the Super Bowl. The coach decides how we're going to win the Super Bowl, right? So the strategic plan is, here's what our plan is to work out. This is like, who are we going to hire to work the plan? We're not going to change the plan, I don't think. So to me, it's like 2 separate issues. I guess they must kind of flow together, and I guess they get a lot of commonalities with them. Is that what happens?
Yep.
I mean, the priorities are the priorities.
That's what I
You
think.
find somebody that's good at.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really care about the $3,000. It was more because
Hey,
we
can I have
felt
this?
like
Yeah,
the combination of that plus the very specific leader profiling that we did 2 years ago, how much is that different now?
Well, everything's a lot different now. Well, look what's going on in the country. Look at the price of gas, look at the price of this, look at the price of food. I mean, everyone's got a different attitude. Education's going through a lot of turmoil these days, all over the country. And
If they can squeeze it in and, I'd be interested in, after her conversation with Paula, find out what Barb and Paula's recommendation would be. To your point on hiring
Paula's cool.
experts.
She's great.
Yeah, to your earlier point on hiring the expert to tell us which route to go, I mean, do we want to retread that ground or not? I guess I would lean into what the experts tell us we should do.
Which is, what you're talking about
Be
the
Barb and
partner
Paula.
ED experts? Well, they decided that we don't need this. Apparently, I didn't have it. No one asked me.
I apologize if there was a misunderstanding. I thought
Well, I
since
made it
you,
pretty clear at our last, whatever deal we had. What was it? We're having these meetings so fast now. Was it 2 weeks ago we were here? you know, that we weren't just gonna, because we had all the stuff that we were looking for at the last superintendent. Well, 4 of the 6 board members weren't on the board when we hired the last superintendent. So there could be different opinions, different this, different that. And I think it's important that we get the taxpayers involved. We're all about this transparency all the time. So I think for $3,000, if it's not gonna hold us up 2 weeks, I mean, leave it open for a week. Matt Killian from the chamber told me he'd send it out to all the businesses. I've got 20,000 emails in my system. We can have this baby out in no time.
Yeah, I don't have any issue with it, but there was no need for you to apologize. If it was anything, it would have been
No.
my own communication when I went off, talked to each one of you as board members and explained why we were gonna cut that corner.
I don't remember anybody talking to me about it, but I'm sorry. I could just be me, you know, I'm always kind of going a little fast. But I'd like to see it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it wasn't an in-depth conversation. It was basically me saying, they're going to send us a proposal and it's gonna leave this out
I
because.
do remember hearing about that. We're gonna
Yeah.
save the $3,000, but
Yeah.
I just don't think it's worth saving the $3,000.
I mean, these are gonna be different questions than were asked, for the strategic
I
plan.
have zero issue with retreading that ground
know?
as long as, to your point, it doesn't slow the process down.
Yeah, I don't wanna slow everything down by 2
Fine with
weeks.
that.
Okay, we'll add it back in, so you can ignore the proposal at the top of page 3 where I crossed out.
Crossed it out,
said,
put it back
please-
in.
Please note with the paragraph
We
about
used
what
to
we
red
weren't
lines, aren't
doing.
we, Heidi?
Yep.
Not black
Okay.
lines.
Yeah.
But we're not doing any we're not doing any,
Well, I mean, I've
Q&A
only heard from
sessions.
3 of us.
It's just it's just gonna be an online
Just online.
only.
Just gathering some data points that they'll consolidate and give us as another
Right.
dashboard to look at as we deliberate and filter. I mean, from my own perspective, like to your point, I was here 2 years ago when we did it. I kind of already know what I'm looking for.
Right. I've never done this before.
So that probably colored the way that I looked at it. Again, I want to open it back up to Sarah, John, and Michelle, though. We heard from 3 people that have a feeling that we should go forward with this. And is there any staunch opposition to spending the extra $3,000 and gathering the info?
I'm fine with it.
I really don't have strong feelings either way. I having been really involved in the strategic planning process, I feel like I have a pretty good understanding about our stakeholders' thoughts and feelings. But if it's important to some of you, I am very supportive of that.
I would agree with that. And if it gives us a feeling from the community that they've been involved and they've been engaged and they've been able to voice their opinion, I think that's well worth the money that we're looking at. I agree, though, that we do have a lot of data that from the last superintendent search and the strategic plan. And I would be shocked if there was a lot of differences, but I think that, I just think that it's worthwhile to go forward as long as it does not take longer. I don't want to change the timeline.
It's gonna be different questions, isn't it?
Well, that'll be that one page will be the same, but then there'll be a little bit different questions.
Different questions than the strategic planning.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
ones that usually overlap are the strengths and weaknesses of the district. That's pretty, the quantitative stuff where we're asking people to rank what's most important to them in terms of background, skills, and experience, that's different because that's job specific to the superintendent.
That's kind of what I'm interested in.
And that will be able to compare it to what the board said. This is where it's also nice to see, it's pretty rare that stakeholder feedback doesn't align with what you've already identified as being important because you got the leadership profile ready to go. And that's different than the last time you did a search because it's the 6 of you that created that leadership profile. But this page is in the survey. I would encourage you, though, in addition to the online, that we do have at least some available in the district office. People who can't or don't want to use a computer need to have access to a hard copy to fill it out. We very rarely get hard copies returned, but want to make sure that's available, especially from ADA perspectives, people who can't or won't use computers. So hard copies are not very common, but we want to make them available.
Okay, last question on this, from me at least. Then once that's been tabulated and distilled into a report like this one, what piece of that is public information that then it can be requested? The raw data, all of it? What?
The report itself is all public information, and we suggest the report goes on the website as soon as possible. So I'll send it to the board, hopefully a few days before April 22nd, so you can see it. It'll be in board book. I'll send it to Kelly to get in board book for you as well. So anyone can read it that early. I would suggest when the time comes, I'm going to ask you if you want to see the raw data. I'd suggest you don't, in part because it does create the opportunity for data requests, and it's very expensive to weed through the raw data. Once you see the report, though, is when you'll decide that. I don't want you deciding tonight, because if you don't see your constituencies in the summary report, if you feel like we've left something out, then I want you to see the raw data. I have not yet, though, had a board in 5 years feel a report didn't represent the people that they represent. So you can get the raw data if you choose to. I just haven't seen it happen yet. Our
That all
reports are
makes
pretty
sense.
good.
I was just trying to think ahead to that too, because that's another thing that, you know, kind of Barb warned us about at the beginning. Once we open this and you get this information, and if we hire against the grain of that information,
Yeah. Well, we'll find
Well-
out.
How is this going to be disseminated then to the people in the district?
We'll do the same thing that we're doing with the Q&A information, is we'll get it to the district to share through all of the distribution lists for parents and stakeholders. From there, if it can go out through the Chamber of Commerce or through your own networks, spread it however you'd like through social
Because
media.
more is better. I mean, if you get
yep,
Yeah,
100 returns or 1,000 or 5,000, the bigger the deal, it's gonna make everything stand out more.
And it'll be a very concerted effort because it is going to be open only for about a week. We'll be able to have it open by Friday of this week.
If people aren't
that's
interested enough to
tremendous,
fill it
Barb,
out in
thanks
a
for
week,
Yeah.
being willing to
Thank
turn
you.
that
Probably
like
not
that.
gonna
That's,
care.
that's a nice accommodation for us.
Barb, can I ask you a question then? It's like, we'll have it so we can put it on we'll have it on the school district link. We can do it through Sky Alert. Are you gonna send it to board members then? Because you say you have a commitment from the chamber personally?
I can.
But so I think that's if they have that, because that's, to me.
The
that-
link
Well, the link's the link. I mean, we can
with
put
it,
it on
you
our
get to put,
personal
is there like
social
a cover
media. We
letter
can
with
put
it
it out
that
wherever
says
we
what
want.
it is?
Send
I
it to
can
the
send you the
paper.
same blurb that we send to the district, which talks about, on April
I can
2nd,
make
the
sure that
board
the
met.
chamber
and
takes care of it.
yeah.
Yep, because that's what I think we can do through the school mechanism.
I think this is a kind of a different survey than the strategic plan. I think in some regards, I think I was even kind of overwhelmed immediately with the strategic plan and everything that's involved, and I think this is a little bit
The
different.
big project.
It is,
I
it
think
is.
the themes are the themes.
And I think in this
To John's point and DJ's point, if it makes the community feel involved, and maybe it points out a piece that we overlooked or didn't give as much weight to somewhere along the way, then it was worth $3,000 to find that.
I think so too.
Um,
I appreciate you.
But I think we're gonna find that it'll align with 2 years ago and it'll align with the strategic plan because those are pretty well aligned now. I don't think the macro mentality of the community at large has changed in terms of what they want from the school
Well, at
district.
least we'll know the right direction to
Yeah,
go.
I mean,
Yeah.
again, I don't have a problem doing it. as
Yeah, I
I
don't
said.
either.
We've got that's a nice solid consensus. I think we move forward with it. Again, thank you for the accommodation. I apologize
Nope, that's
for,
okay.
I think it may surprise us. I think we may get a lot of people.
more is the better if it does.
Yeah.
So focus groups, listening sessions, or survey groups, do you want to do that as an à la carte option in addition to the survey that you're now doing? The bottom of page 3 is the explanation of that à la carte option.
I'll go first. I don't wanna do them.
I'll go second. I don't wanna do them.
I'll go third, I don't want to do them.
I'm comfortable with that too. I think doing the survey is a good way to
I think
get
it's
some of that.
good compromise
Yep.
to get some data without dragging the school staff
They're
through
gonna
all
do
of
the
this.
They're gonna have the Q&A anyway, so if you're really interested.
Yep. Combination of those two things gives multiple opportunities for voices to be heard. Plus, God forbid, they can email or call their board member and tell them what they want.
The finalist interviews, we already talked a little bit about, you're not deciding on that yet, but halfway down the stakeholder input page from the proposal, the input forums outline what I was talking about in terms of stakeholders providing you strengths and weaknesses on your candidates. That's a decision you'll make the night of April 22nd, whether or not you want to do that, whether you want to do interview committees, whether you want to rely on the stakeholder report as the voice of the stakeholders. That'll all be decided on that day.
So can I ask a question?
Yes.
It's more for like Sarah and Kevin. Are you guys gonna like loop us in?
On which piece?
Like Sarah said, she'd like to have those committees that watch the interviews and then give us feedback.
Oh, yeah.
I said I wasn't all about that. You know, I'm not saying I'm right, but are you, or is that just, cause we're gonna go to this meeting, or are we just gonna hash it out when we get there? We're gonna try and have a decision made before the 22nd, right?
I don't think you should decide until you've seen the stakeholder report.
Okay.
That's
well,
one of those forks
well,
in the
that's very
road
good.
where once
Then
you've seen
everybody's
it-
looped
yeah,
in.
once you've
There's
seen
We're
the
all
thinking
stakeholder.
singing
about
off the
things I
same
shouldn't
sheet
be
of
wasting
music,
my time on.
basically.
I've had board members that insist we need to do interview committees. The staff has got to interview this person, and so do parents. And then I say, let's just wait and see the stakeholder summary report, and then when they see it, they're like, oh, I guess parents are heard, and oh, staff is heard, and then they're comfortable not doing it
Then we can
anymore.
refine
So
what that process looks like at that
We'll
point
just wait
in
and
the
talk about that
process.
in April.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, great, thank you. So then the next thing, these don't take so long, the role of the current superintendent. I always want to talk about this at the planning meeting as far as expectations. Generally speaking, the current superintendent does not have a role in the search process, does not attend the superintendent search meetings either, but I want to make sure what is the will of the board in that regard, and whatever the will of the board is, how does Superintendent Hahn feel about that?
How about you go first?
I will act in the capacity of what the board directs me to.
Oh, that's a deal there.
But I can also, as people have called, I mean, any highlight on that sheet, I've probably reiterated. I think you guys know me well enough, how
Yeah.
I love the district and all
You're
the things
cool.
I sing praises about the district. But I agree, I don't know that I'm all about not attending a meeting these days.
I
now.
would
No,
say
so-
that if I were you.
Well, I
Why
mean,
would
it's
you wanna come to
traditionally
the meeting?
accepted
No.
that that's how that goes.
That'd be
right?
odd. I don't think you should have to go to those meetings.
Okay,
But I
sounds like
will-
we have consensus unless directors Ward and Brecken have any contrary opinions. I'm seeing shaking heads.
So then when it comes to these special meetings, I can count myself
You can cross them off.
Cross them off.
absent, okay?
Oh, she's happy about that. Sun's gonna come
That
out.
80-hour work week just went down to 75.
And thank you for taking the phone calls, because even if
absolutely.
superintendents are not involved in the process, they serve as ambassadors for the position, and I know you're already doing that, so thank you.
Absolutely, very happy to brag.
School board spokesperson, that is there in case you get any media requests for comments on the search. I would recommend it be the board chair. It's generally a very generic quote that might be asked for. We just don't want different messaging coming from different board members about the process itself. So if you could speak with one voice around the process, if asked for media inquiries, is everyone okay with the board chair serving in that role?
I am.
I am.
Are you okay with that, Chair Boyles?
I mean, if there's enough room in the newspaper.
Paper. You'll be in the paper.
Yeah, oh, good.
Yeah.
That always goes so well for me and you.
All right, I'm hearing that's all right. Okay, the in-district contact persons, thus far I'm working with Kelly. And I've been CCing Heidi on it as well, and the board chair. I always loop in the board chair on my district emails, just so the board is in the loop of what I'm talking to the staff about.
So the name I'm gonna give you will be Carla Axelson. She coordinates communications.
Carla?
We have Anne Marie Locker and Carla Axelson, but Carla Axelson will be the person that'll be doing a lot of the website link.
Okay.
Skylark messages out,
Okay,
but I can get to their emails and make sure we spell it correctly.
perfect. Okay, sounds good. Any other district contact people I should be aware of, then perhaps Kelly, and then copying Superintendent Hahn?
Who's the audience, like who would be contacting? Candidates too?
No, candidates only contact me.
Correct, okay. Then if it's only candidates, that feels like a pretty comprehensive list to me. Does it to you, Dr. Hahn?
I think the big thing is just right now, Kelly's gonna help coordinate a lot of the meetings and the groups and getting that all scheduled and all the agendas. It's communications, so Carla and Anne Marie.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Search preview meetings, we've already lined up, and you've said it's okay, correct? I can meet with those 3 groups on the 12th?
Sure.
Via Google Meet, great, all right. And then the search agreement, I did want to walk through that. You're not doing focus groups or listening sessions at all. If you look at the summary of search services, this is also from the proposal. This is where I'd like you to decide upon, okay, I'm gonna uncross out bullet number 2.
Yep.
It's currently crossed out, but I'm gonna uncross that out. And then halfway down the page, there are 2 bullet points that have double red asterisks behind it. Those are the ones that I do virtually, unless you'd like me there in person. And at the bottom of the proposal page, it says designated virtual meetings, but if you'd like me here, I can be here for $300 a meeting. For that's $300 or $600. Or I do them virtually. It's up to you.
I'm 100% cool with virtual.
I think I am too. Is that what you do the majority of the time?
Majority of the time, yes, but there's some boards that are just in-person boards, and they want me here to do the interview training, and they want me here to present the candidates. You've got a great tech, I was telling the tech guy earlier, it's a great setup. Boy, can you hear things really well. The recording is wonderful, so you don't have the AV problems that a lot of districts
So
have.
we're gonna try to be here.
We're
Yeah,
gonna
I
be
mean, the
here.
6 of us are, we've all cleared our calendars and committed to being
Yeah, I've
here
got it
for all
all.
of those, right? That's the expectation, at
That'll
least
be
from
nice.
my
Next week.
perspective, and then
Discuss things.
Barb will be the voice of aye.
Overhead.
She'll be the Zoom
Voice
voice.
of God, we have that too. All right, so those, I'll both be joining Google Meet. Are these Google Meet? Okay, I'll do both of those, so there's no charge for any of that. On the next page, estimated fee for service, I'm gonna cross out the 16.5 and it'll be 19.5 with the proposal or with the survey. You have the option to add national advertising and background checks. I would hold off maybe on the background checks decision until you know who your semifinalists or finalists are. It's a very in-depth background check. Obviously, everyone who works here takes a background check. Is it like $15, I think, the Minnesota criminal background check? Everyone takes that. This is educational credentials to verify if they have a PhD, that they really have a PhD. And it also is to verify their educational employment going back 5 years, or 10 years, excuse me, that they really worked where they say they worked. It may not be necessary if you hire someone who's a known commodity. There are people that don't necessarily, I would say, need a background check to this. I mean,
I think we just-
$395 a person is a lot, but it's very, very in-depth. So we can wait on that one. But the national advertising, if you want it, you should decide tonight so we can get that posted nationally, probably by Thursday of this week. Do any of those national sites appeal to you?
No,
No? Did you say no, John?
I said no.
How come?
I just think that, I think we're gonna have a plethora of candidates that are gonna be qualified and good, and I don't think we need to go, and if somebody's really interested, they'll find it. I understand, know that, you know, the possibility of getting somebody nationwide as well, but is there extra, I forgot, is there extra, there's an extra
Yeah,
charge?
yeah,
for
it's
that, isn't there?
outlined in the fee structure that they've got
Yeah,
on
Yeah, I
that
see,
page 10.
30 days, 250 or whatever.
1,500
Yeah,
bucks
I
for
see.
all of them.
How much?
1,500 for all of them. What's
Okay.
under 1,500? It's, yeah, it's 1,500 for all of them. What do you see, Barb?
I don't see it done very often unless it's a large district, particularly in the metro, or they have communities that some of these particular groups, for instance, we've done searches with districts that include a lot of indigenous students, and they may want to advertise on the National Indian Education Association. We have districts that are very diverse, are really struggling with equity issues in Twin Cities, and they want to make sure they reach out to BIPOC candidates. So they may advertise on the National Alliance of Black School Educators. Otherwise, your reputation, as I mentioned earlier, is the #1 draw. You also have a shorter application window of 2.5 weeks, and all of these are 30 days or longer, so you would get half the bang for your buck because it's posted for 30 days. They don't let us do 2-week postings, 2.5-week postings, so it does cost more for a shorter amount of time.
So
Most
this will
districts
be,
don't do it.
the answer will be anecdotal, but once this thing posts tomorrow or whatever, is it fair to say that, let's say there are candidates or potential candidates in surrounding states or even other states, they know the mechanisms to come into our state and look to see if they're interested in looking at openings in Minnesota. They know the resources, they would come to the Massa site or whatever
Or our
to
site.
look those listings up, right?
Yes. And usually national candidates are looking to return to Minnesota for some reason.
That's what I kinda
Someone just
wondered.
doesn't wake up in
Here.
Phoenix one day and decide they want to move to Minnesota. They probably have worked here or have family here or a spouse used to live here, something like that, that brings them back. Then they're going to MASA's and MSBA's websites. Also, you may have seen in the proposal, we don't use AppleTrack anymore. We use one called Revelis, which is proprietary, and it's just for school board associations that do searches. All of our postings for Minnesota are seen by school board associations across the country. So if someone in Florida or Michigan or Wisconsin or Omaha are looking at their school board association sites, they'll see Minnesota's postings as well through Revelis. So that's a nice national advertising. It's just not a niche advertising like these are.
Well, maybe
So-
we'll just find them.
Totally up to
I
you.
think we are. I mean,
Yeah, I
you
think
know,
we're fine.
I could go either way on it, but I don't, again, I'm not gonna get wrapped around the axle on
Me.
$1,400, but,
We're fine.
okay, I think we're good. I think,
I'll
so,
go with John and say no.
okay.
Okay. And then are you okay on the background checks waiting to decide, or do you want to decide right now that you will do the in-depth background check on your lone finalists or your last 3 finalists? Or do you want to wait and see who they are first?
How long does it take?
About a week.
Is it gonna slow any of the process down?
Yeah.
When are your interviews? If you wait until after round one, which is on,
We're interviewing on the 2nd and 3rd, and we're doing the final
8th.
3 on the 8th.
you could start them on the 3rd after you've named your last 2 or 3 and do it on the last 2 or 3. It might not be back by the 8th, but it for sure will be back before the 13th. You'd hate to uncover something about someone though before the 13th.
When you're in
when you're in
negotiations with them.
negotiations, so.
Well,
We
we'll
could do
have
it
them
on all
sign
6,
something.
but that's expensive.
My daughter's taken her to engineering jobs, and both times you have to sign something that if your background check comes in the other way.
Of
around,
course,
you're
but it
out.
would be a
And
regrettable circumstance to have to reel back in and go to somebody we passed over and say,
Maybe we
hey,
should-
number
maybe
2,
we-
you're up.
maybe we should move these dates around just
Yeah.
a little bit.
Cougar flamed out, Maverick, you're in. You know, we don't wanna.
Maybe we should move these dates around, cause I feel pretty,
Yeah.
I think we need to do the background.
I think we should just commit to the slightly, I mean, we're not spending on advertising. I would spend it here once we identify.
The
We should
6th?
probably, yeah, we probably better do it.
Just do all 6?
I think it would have served us if we'd have done it last time.
Then we would have the time, cause you'd start on the 2nd. Would we have it back by the 9th?
You should, that's what we.
Right, and then that's,
regarding your.
Actually, on April
You what?
30th, yeah, May 1st, we would start the process.
Oh, because we'll know the 6th on the 30th.
Can we be clear about
The
that?
night of 30th, we could send it to all 5 or 6 and say, you need to start your background check process. It takes 20 minutes for them to type it all in, and then the
Let's
firm
just-
is called
well, how does it
Checker.
work? They get a link and then they go
They get a
through and
link.
they authorize us to do the background check and then that's all
They
processed
authorize
through
a company
TransUnion or
called
somebody like that.
Checker.
Yeah.
Checker is the company that does the national
Okay.
background searches for us. Now, it is educational credentials, criminal background check, and work history are the 3 biggest ones. And it's not a reference checking process where there's no Google searches involved in the background check. The background check is, do you really have a PhD?
Right.
Did you really graduate from MIT? Did you really work here for 5 years? That's what that is. So personal characteristics and reputation is not part of the background check.
It's all factual.
Is,
Actual.
So we
Is-
would be doing it on 6 people?
Or whatever our final,
Or
or
3.
whatever
Okay.
our applicant, our interviewee pool is.
Okay.
There's
Yeah,
no
we may
guarantee
only have
that's 6
4.
people. It could be 7, it could be 3.
Okay.
I would just like to interject that I think we can do it with the final, whether it's 3 or 2 or 4. I don't think we need to do everybody that, is the first round candidates. I think we can wait until we come up with the finalists and do them with those folks. In my opinion, that's just
Well,
my
so
opinion.
the reason that we're going the other direction from a conversational perspective is because of the timeline.
Can't meet the timeline.
We would not have
My-
those background checks on those final 2 or 3 back in time. If we do it that way, what happens is we pick somebody, we enter negotiations with them on the 9th, and then their background check comes back on the 12th.
Okay,
But
All right,
there's an
I see.
opportunity to do reference checks in there, aside from the background checks, correct?
Yeah, we can call it around.
We do reference checks on all of the applicants that we're considering recommending. So let's say if you have 10 applicants, we'll probably find, I'm just guessing, 6 to 8 that we think are a good fit. So we'll do reference checks on all of those folks. It is, however, references that they've said we can call. Because we're bound by data privacy, so we can't call my neighbor next door and say, what do you think of this person?
Yep.
Because all of a sudden I've outed them that they've applied for this job.
Now, the
So we're calling reference checks that they already know are gonna say good things. The opportunity for the deeper depth is between round 1 and round 2, and we'll go through this on interview training. We do like to have a school board member make some phone calls on your last 2 or 3 people. And that is partly because now you can call anybody, because their name is public. Once their name is public, you can talk to anybody about any of them. And people will tell school board members things that they won't tell the search firm. So there is going to be a need for someone on the board to volunteer to make some calls beginning on May 4th and come back with a high-level report on May 8th after the interviews about what you learned of these folks. So
Now,
there is
John,
that.
to your concern, the reality is if we get down to 3 finalists and they're all credentialed people that already exist in the state, the odds that they're gonna come back with having not gone to the University of Granada, or whatever, right? Like, it's pretty slim that something would pop up in there, but.
Okay,
My thought is too, is if something did come up after our May 8th interviews, we can always do a special board meeting to approve the new superintendent after the 13th.
Yeah.
I don't think we should
Yeah.
worry about that date so much.
Is that in line with
Good
what you're
point.
used to?
yes. if you haven't
Right.
figured
I
out
think
your
that's fine then.
negotiations, you can
I can get on board with that, and we could adjust on the fly if we had to for some reason.
Barb, I also want to ask, I know that you said criminal background check. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Barb.
Nope, correct. Yes, I'm sorry.
You said criminal and all those are important. Is part of that background check include credit history?
I believe it does.
Okay,
I believe it
That's
does,
important
because
as
we
well
have
for
had a
me.
candidate that showed a bankruptcy up in their credit check report. Didn't disqualify them from employment, but I believe it did show up in their credit check,
okay.
or background check, I'm sorry. Yes. So am I hearing
Thank you.
background checks on all of your semifinalists?
Well, that's
Round one
what
people?
we started with, but then we were kind of easing away from it because we felt like we could pivot if we had to. That's why,
Okay.
again, what are you used to seeing when we're
It's
compressed
usually-
like this?
It's usually on the last people, just because expense is a concern for many districts. And so it's usually on the last 2 or 3, or we have some districts that say, we're just going to do it on the last one person and pay for one background check in depth on that last person. And then hope everything comes out really clean.
Yeah.
Well, let's just plan on doing it on our semifinalists, and then maybe when we get to the deal, we'll only have 3 semifinalists.
Yep.
Like you said, we might have 7, we might have 3. And
Well, 'cause we can pivot at
change
that
our mind,
point.
right?
You can change your mind.
Yeah, we can pivot on that at that point.
Yeah, if we
So-
have, let's say we have, I mean, I don't think we will, but let's
So
just say
maybe we
have-
plan on doing it, but know that we may decide we don't need to at that point and push it to the finalists.
Okay.
'Cause I'm
or-
with you, you don't wanna start negotiating with somebody. This is a big job, this is a big deal, this is a big job, so it's like, it'd be nice to know that, hey, that all checked out, 'cause I don't feel very comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have the ability, like in your world, my world, I can go to candidate number 1 if they flunk. I can move on to number 2 and tell them they're number 1. We don't get to do that in this world. The world's gonna know we.
And we need to
It's all
make sure
very
that
public.
we're not putting somebody that should be in this.
Every comment, every interview, all very public.
Okay, so at this point, all semifinalists. And you'll notice one thing is we're saying semifinalists for round 1 and finalists for round 2.
Yep.
On the timeline, it does say you're selecting your finalists on April 30th. Technically, they are your semifinalists. We have that in there because statute defines a finalist as someone
I
who's
see.
going to be interviewed by the school board for a position. The minute you name them to be interviewed, statute says they're a finalist. In the real world, they're a semifinalist. And that's what the interview schedules and stuff will say, semifinalists. It's just statute language says finalists for both round 1 and round 2. Just
And we don't need to have
semantics.
3 finalists, right? We could
Nope.
have
No,
2.
we can have.
You could have
1, 7.
Gotcha,
We can do
gotcha.
whatever we
Or
want.
there might not be any.
That's
There
true.
may not be an
Absolutely.
option, huh?
Okay.
Hopefully it's not, but.
The very last piece is this 2 screening priorities, and this goes back to when I mentioned we don't use AppleTrack anymore. When we did, every question in the application had to be the same for every single search. With Revelis, we can custom create questions for Brainerd Public Schools that you want to see your applicants answer. So these are just some
Excuse me,
examples.
Barb.
Yes.
Barb, can we just, Mr. Chair, can we just go back? You know, the guarantee, I wanted to ask a question on the guarantee.
Okay.
Absolutely,
Okay?
go ahead,
So
John.
I know, all right, thank you. So Barb, I know that the guarantee talks about, and you already have suggested or talked about it, but I know that it says that this school district must participate in the transition workshop. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and we're doing that. When we're doing that, right?
The transition workshop will be next fall. If you have a superintendent that starts in July, I'd like to come back and do a workshop with you around expectations for performance, and particularly performance evaluation of the superintendent, and how will you gauge that that first year has gone the way the board wants it to. So we feel that's really important. We've had some districts not do that, and halfway through the year, they realize that the superintendent doesn't quite understand what the board wants from them, and it becomes an uncomfortable conversation. So we're trying to have a proactive conversation next fall about what do you want that first year to look like in terms of outcomes from your superintendent. So you as a board team, not just you 6, but the superintendent, the 7 of you will set goals, maybe standards and elements that they need to meet in order to be rated a highly effective superintendent after 1 year with the district. So that is the transition workshop next fall. And if you
That's
don't
it?
participate in it, that's absolutely fine. You're not required to. It's a $1,300 workshop, so I encourage you to do it because it's part of the search package. You don't have to do it. If you don't do it, however, and for whatever reason that person leaves within a year or you release them within a year, then we have to charge you for the next search. But if you've done the workshop and you still part ways within a year, we do another search for free.
So it's like insurance.
Yeah,
We're doing
And I
it.
just,
That's a good way of putting it.
a premium.
That
Yeah.
sells that. We're doing it.
Yep.
It's insurance.
Any objections to
I just want-
opting in for that, Directors Brecken and Ward?
No, no objections.
no, I think it's a great idea. I just wanted to be clear on it. I wanted to hear from you what the transition workshop was all about. I do see, however, in the guarantee, it says, the school board will be responsible for any new direct expenses, if any, incurred by the MSBA for the second search. Well, aren't they all new expenses
Any
in
new
a second
direct
search?
expenses, if you choose national advertising, for example, for the second search, that'll be out of your own pocket if you want to do national advertising or another background check.
Anything beyond your core services
Correct.
that are part of a search?
Correct.
So then the guarantee means we'd get a second chance for free then?
Yes.
With new candidates or with the same candidates?
New candidates, a whole new search.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think your candidate will appreciate it as well.
Oh, for sure.
I just like to check out guarantees, I'm sorry.
No,
Clarity
I
is
appreciate that. Clarity of expectations is really important.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, the candidate will appreciate it.
Can't, with that transition workshop?
Yes.
Yes, they cannot read your minds, especially a new superintendent that's drinking from a fire hose. If they're new to the district or new to Minnesota, they need to know what you expect from them in order to do their very best that first year. So that's what we do. The screening priorities, these are the questions you can ask in your application. These are just some categories, 12 categories that other districts have asked about. You don't have to use these exact questions. Sometimes people do. One question, there's three. One question we always ask is, based on the leadership profile for this district, why are you the best candidate for Brainerd Public Schools? So they'll need to tell you that. What other two things would you like to ask about in your application? And the way to think about it is, what do you want them to answer for you to be interested in interviewing them? What do you want to ask about in order to bring them in for an interview?
What do we want to ask?
Well,
about?
I've ranked,
Go ahead, John. You were gonna say you ranked
What?
these.
I've ranked them and, but it kind of goes back to even what the brochure it talked about or whatever, and 2 and 5 are important to me. 1 is important to me. 8 is important and 10 is important. And so those are, I'd have to pick 2 out of those that are important to me.
I have a hard time disagreeing with those as your priorities. I think as I look at 1 and 2, I feel like you need to do 1 to get 2,
Yeah.
if that helps you. Right, because as I think, because as I consider the idea of a bond referendum as a priority, 1, we have kind of a mixed bag from a board mentality around that at the moment, or at least the last time we discussed it in a public setting. And 2, in my mind, one of the things I'm looking for in the next superintendent is that ability to build those relationships, particularly with the community, even more particularly with the business community, to build some energy around support for a potential bond, or a potential operating levy, not a bond referendum. Well, potentially, I guess, a technology bond too. And then I'm actually kind of where John is on the rest of these. Like 12, I don't know that I.
Any of these could also be interview questions. If you
Yep.
think about your questions as a funnel, usually the application questions are pretty broad. Just to get a general idea of who these people are that intrigues you. And then for round 1, you're asking more specifics about things. Maybe referendums are a good first round question. And then second round tends to be very specific questions. Concrete examples, scenario questions, things like that. So broad to narrow in general. So I had a district once in their
1 and 11.
application. The biggest, don't do this, the biggest issue for a district I work with this year was they were in statutory operating debt. And they wanted to ask in the application, how would you get us out of statutory operating debt? That was really specific.
How would you keep us out of
That's what
it?
you said.
And I talked them out of that because it was a red flag for any candidates applying for it, because that was a really big
Well, they know they haven't got
lift
to, you know,
right
it's
at the
like,
beginning. So I wouldn't suggest you do that.
I agree. I think a few folks have mentioned number 6 because I think it incorporates
That's my favorite.
the leadership style to engage the team and the community, which I think encompasses both things that I
Yeah,
would look
I
for.
think it
in their
folds one
approach.
in there. I didn't even think about that. I like that.
What do you think, Randy?
I circled 6.
Well, then that's pretty good. There's 4 of
Yeah.
us.
I really like 10 too, because I think it defines their philosophy around what it means to be a superintendent and what that looks like for them.
I like 10 as well.
My two choices were 6 and 10. I mean, I think 1 and 2 are really super important, but I think that's an expectation regardless, but I liked 6 and 10.
I'm on board with 6 and 10. How about
So
you,
am I.
RJ?
Wow.
Yeah, I don't have a problem, you know, a vision for the future of education. Yeah, that's kind of important.
I mean, I feel like, to
No?
Barb's point, the rest of these are good interview questions to really drill down into a lot of these things, but I think they managed to catch the essence of more of the rest of the 12 than any of the other 2 do, or any of the other 8, 10. All right,
What would you think about adding to number 10 after it says educational systems and declining enrollment?
I think you're thinking about two different things. I mean, how long are these answers, Barb? Are you writing a paragraph or are you writing a book?
Some candidates write you a paragraph, some will write a book, and that's too long. We look for, if you're looking at text, it's usually about that long by about that wide. Maybe 8-point font.
You know, John, we could ask them about that declining enrollment when we got them in the seat.
Yeah. That's a good point, Judy.
I mean, I think it's a
Yep.
bullet point in the future of education, and everybody knows, I mean, public school enrollment nationally is declining. Public school enrollment at
Right.
the state level is declining, so it's not a mystery that we're declining.
No. But it's a
But
good,
I also think that there's opportunities out there for leadership to, potential leadership to, look at how to market, because that's what we're talking about, honestly.
Yep, I would agree. I think at the interview layer, that's an important question. That's my opinion on it.
my opinion is,
Yep.
of course, I've always got a different opinion than all you guys, is that if you build a successful administrative team, and we find out what your vision for the future of education is, you might start to see a
Other
change.
things.
You might change things. Maybe. Who knows?
Well, we don't, am I missing something here? There's not a question on here about
There's really not a
reduced enrollment, is there?
No,
No, but we can add that to the
Specifically?
interview stuff.
Yeah.
there really isn't a bad question.
There's a question 4 talks about open enrollment, but that doesn't,
Well, to me, that would be the one I would repurpose as a declining enrollment question, as opposed to just, because open enrollment is
Yeah.
just one bullet point in the litany of reasons that our enrollment is
Yeah.
declining, right?
because I'd written underneath question 4, how would they handle reduced enrollment?
Yeah, I think that's great.
Whatever.
Well, can we go with 6 and 10?
I feel good about it.
I do too.
Can I ask one more question about 6?
Yep.
Elaborate on your approach to building a successful administrative team. Are they not going to inherit an administrative team? How are they going to build a successful team if they're going to inherit an administrative team?
Well, but you
can
inherited
change
a
it.
football team and you change the offense and change the defense and change, you're still, it doesn't mean that they're gonna have to hire everybody. Right? Is that how you think about that part?
right.
Or am I screwed up on that?
Yeah.
Building and maintaining a successful administrative team, building and maintaining instead of just building.
Well, we could say that.
Well, yeah, I mean, to me, it's not only building, but I mean, people have to buy in. And if there's not buy-in, what do we do?
Well, that's not what we do. It's what the superintendent does.
Understand.
I mean, you
But
could
there's an
even,
expectation that,
You're hiring.
yeah.
right, understand. But I mean,
He or she can. That's their
Okay.
job. Or hallelujah,
I mean, you could even change that building to coaching, elaborate on your approach to coaching a successful administrative team. Or if building is too
I vote for 6 and
concrete.
10.
But Sarah's question was about the term building. Is there a better word?
I think it's a pretty good word.
I'm fine with it. I think people
a
will
big
interpret it how they interpret it.
Elaborate on your approach.
Well, I mean,
Whatever,
I
yeah.
like the question the way it's worded,
Yeah,
as opposed
that's
to, like, I get where John's coming from. The reason I like it is what we're asking somebody to do is paint us a picture of what a multi-year administration would look like for them. And, you know, so that might be, maybe all the pieces aren't completely in place when Dr. Hahn departs and this new person comes in, so there's some immediate things to be done, but also over the course of time. It's not just, well, no, I have the wrong person in the wrong spot, it's literally looking at the organizational structure from top to bottom, and all of those different things. So
And
I
it,
think it's-
yeah, I think it's true, and it's theoretical, right? How would you build a team?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hypothetical, what would you do, not, here's the bucket of Legos we have right now, what would you build? It's, what would you build? And I think, again, in the interview, you can say, okay, well, you're gonna walk into a situation where X, Y, Z is happening. We have some transitional elements with our director of teaching and learning position, we have some other things going on. I think at the interview level, you could really drill into that and say, what are your thoughts around that? But I think at a macro level, that's too precise for 2 out of 12 general questions to just get a peek into the way their brain works.
And I would like to hear how they prioritize building relationships with the people that are working with them. So I think it gives us a little window into who they are and what they value. So I really like that question.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. All right, then,
Yep.
hearing no objections, we'll move forward with questions 6 and 10 as worded.
The last item on the agenda is questions. What else do you have for me that you need to know before you're comfortable moving forward?
What's your cell phone number? We're gonna be calling you all.
On the vacancy brochure, page 2, and there it is. I'm on speed dial if you need it. And search season is 7 days a week, by the way. Don't feel badly if you need to call or text on a weekend. It doesn't matter. So don't feel like you need to wait till Mondays, okay?
You're
Okay.
a workaholic. You're gonna go home and touch all this up and get all this done tonight? Where's home? Minneapolis?
Nicollet.
Oh, so you-
great little town.
you know the
Know
words.
exactly where it's
Mr.
at.
Go ahead, John, do you have questions for Barb?
Well, I was just gonna say, Mr. Schwindeman better reevaluate his pay structure with you.
You can talk to Kirk about that. I'd be okay with that. I also brought these
Yeah.
booklets. I heard some conversation about whether or not you wanted to do the hiring the right superintendent workshop. If you'd like to have the booklets from the workshop, you can. Typically, we do these workshops in the fall or winter if searches are going to ramp up in the winter. So it's a little late to actually do one. What I tell people is by doing a search with us, you basically are elongating a 2-hour workshop into, in your case, about a month and a half. The whole workshop will be over the course of this search. But if you want to read more about superintendent search, this is generic. We do it for districts that don't hire MSBA to do a search. It's got information you might find helpful. If you're someone who likes to really absorb processes, you're welcome to these. I can leave all of these here with,
So you're basically gonna teach us as we go.
yes. But if you want to read this in advance, and if you're curious what's going to happen as we move forward, the difference is this is applicable to any search, whether you work with us or School Exec Connect or HYA or whomever, because it's very generic. The specificity of MSBA's searches, the uniqueness of what we do are not in here. Things like seeing the applications and choosing stakeholder involvement, A, B, or C. That's not in there because we don't want to tell members our process if they choose to do the search themselves or work with another firm. So it's kind of bland compared to what you're actually going to go through, but there is a lot of information in here. If you want them, you can certainly have those. Okay?
Don't want to be giving out any trade secrets, right?
There's no trade secrets in here at all.
Don't blame you.
I'll go around Robin. Director Brecken, any questions for Barb?
No, I just want to thank you, Barb. The document you put together and your ability to communicate with us, kind of what our process, I just really appreciate your work that you've done. And I'm excited to continue to work with you in this process. I feel very confident in the relationship that we will have with you.
Great. Thank you.
Director Ward, any other questions?
No questions. I will echo what Michelle Director Brecken said, thank you for everything you've done and you're going to do for us. And I feel even better now with MSBA than I ever have been. And so thank you. Please greet Terry Morrow and Denise Dietrich for me as well.
I will do that.
And the
Thank
other,
you.
and the other John Ward.
And the other John Ward. I work with the John Ward in superintendent search. It's kind of funny.
Oh, wow, 2 of those.
There's 2 John Wards out there.
Okay, I hope their health insurance 100% covers therapy. Any other questions from the 4 of us present? I mean, I could re-echo what everybody else said, but thank you so much for,
No,
and John said it best, for what you're
Fantastic.
going to do.
no, very well laid out.
Yeah, thank you. We are excited.
All right, so the way we have this structured on the agenda is kind of odd. We had search timeline, hiring criteria, stakeholder involvement, and procedures. We did define those as part of the document. So I think what I would like to do is entertain a motion to approve that as stated in the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion from Director Heidman with a second from Director Ward to approve the search timeline, hiring criteria, stakeholder involvement, and the procedures as outlined by our discussion and documented by Barb and read back to us. I think we're all good with that. Any other discussion about that piece? Hearing none, Sue, could we do a roll call vote, please?
Randy Heidman,
Yes.
Sarah Spear,
Yes.
John Ward,
Yes.
Kevin Boyles.
Yes.
Michelle Brecken,
Yes.
DJ Donlinger.
Yes.
All pass.
Wonderful. So the next action item was, and we kind of tackled these all at the same time, was to decide upon and schedule the steps necessary for the rest of the hiring process, which includes, Barb, just for our edification, the background check stuff, the search process, the interview, or the screening questions, anything I'm leaving out.
Other than, so we can get this posted tomorrow at 12:30. If in the morning I get a flood of input from board members about what you want changed in the brochure, is it okay with all of you if I work directly with your chair to come up with the final version? Rather than trying to reach all of you tomorrow morning? I don't think that's gonna happen, but if you do flood me with all kinds of ideas, can I work directly with the chair to get this posted by noon tomorrow? That's
I'm
the only
fine with
other
that.
I'm fine. If I have any changes, I'll send them to him and.
And I sent you the email documenting the changes as discussed with fact checking and verification.
Thank you
I will
very much.
feel, just to let you know, there's a bunch of changes to this thing. I'm gonna feel like I got shanghaied. So,
I doubt
I
there
don't
will
know why
be.
there would be any
I doubt
changes.
there
We
will
go
be.
through every single bullet item, line item, one by one, so
There shouldn't be.
I hope not.
Did you want us to, as part of this motion, you had mentioned delegating to Director Boyles any loose ends that come out of this, if there's anything that,
Those are kind of those loose ends. If I need to
Okay.
get this posted tomorrow at noon, and I've heard from 3 different people that you want the language changed, can I suggest language to him? And he says, yes, that's fine.
Okay.
That's kind of the loose end by
Those are the
tomorrow.
ones you were
Otherwise, the rest of
thinking
this
of?
process, every meeting,
okay.
you're all making decisions as a group. This is
Great.
not something I'll work with him directly, other than those teeny little things that maybe crop up.
Or if we have a suggested change, can I go directly to Kevin with
Be
it?
faster if you come to me with it.
Okay.
Email me
All
tonight
right.
or tomorrow morning with
Okay.
it. That'll be faster.
I doubt that I will.
Okay, thanks for asking.
Okay, so once again, entertaining a motion,
To adjourn?
no, not that one yet. A motion to approve the scheduling of the steps necessary for the rest of the hiring
Motion.
process as outlined.
I make the motion.
Second,
Okay, so we have a motion from Director Dondelinger and a second from Director Spear. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, Sue.
Sarah Spear. John Ward,
Yes.
Kevin Boyles.
Yes.
Michelle Brecken,
Yes.
DJ Donlinger,
Yes.
Randy Heidman.
Yes.
All pass.
Thank you. And last but not least, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion from Director Dondelinger with a second from Director Heidman. Any further discussion on adjourning? Roll call vote, Sue.
John Ward,
Yes.
Kevin Boyles,
Yes.
Michelle Brecken,
Yes.
DJ Donlinger,
Yes.
Randy Heidman,
Yes.
Sarah Spear.
yes.
All pass.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.